Hidden Secrets of Oriental Wealth by Dr. Tao Wei, 5th edition introduction. It's not right the way the Asians come in here and push the black people back. They get in here and they get to boasting. They want their own damn way. I don't blame them. They don't really bother anyone. They just crowd you out. They come over here with money and now they're driving around in their Mercedes and Rolls Royces. It used to be that you hated Mexicans. Now blacks hate the Asians because, like the Mexicans, Asians got to step over us on their climb upward. The system we live in profits from division and conflict between lower classes. It is the classic cycle of oppression. One group isn't down so low and then they're manipulated into believing the group next to them is to blame. The real source of the problem is that our bankrupt, American, economic policies have made sure that poverty is built right into the system. The scapegoating that goes on here, blacks blaming Asians, whites blaming Asians, Asians blaming blacks and Hispanics, is no accident. When I first read the above comments made by these African Americans, it was easy to see that there was a dangerous problem here that required a solution. I, for one, would certainly not like to walk through an ethnic neighborhood and to have these kinds of confused and hateful thoughts directed at me merely because of my race. Who would? And yet, I have heard very similar words coming from the mouths of ignorant white people who also do not understand the Oriental ways of making money. It is not a matter of being racially an Asian that has allowed the Asian peoples to become the richest ethnic group in America as well as the richest in the world. That's right. According to U.S. government statistics, it is not the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who are the richest people in this wonderful country. Asians, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese are the richest. Of course, the Jews control the Federal Reserve banking swindle and the media monopoly, so they are the richest of all, but it is how Asians have become richer than white people that is our subject here. Asian Americans are the only racial group doing better than whites when it comes to income. The Asian median household income in the U.S. was $36,784 in 1989, compared with $31,435 for white households. In the nation, Asian median household income relative to that of whites rose from 13% higher in 1979 to 17% higher in 1989. The new numbers also include the probability that a household in any racial group would have an income of more than $100,000. For Asians, the probability is 7.5 in 100, for whites it is 4.8, for Hispanics it is 1.9, and for blacks it is 1.2. With these kinds of statistics, it is easy to jump to the conclusion that these people as a race have something special that no one else has. And yet, race has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is knowledge and knowledge alone that has allowed even the poorest of Vietnamese boat people, to name the latest immigrant group, to prosper in this land of opportunity. Yes, America is a land of opportunity. And I, for one, would like to feel free to walk along any street or alley in the entire nation without fearing that someone of another ethnic group would wish me harm merely because of our being of different races. In America, as in the rest of the world, the pie is big enough for everyone to have a piece. The age-old problem is that those who know how to cut the pie, selfishly cut themselves the biggest possible piece and leave nothing for anyone else. Since I do not see anyone else sharing the knowledge that makes the Asian people and Asian culture so profoundly excellent, I have decided to publish this knowledge so that everyone, white, black, yellow, brown, red, and even the satin blue, can know the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. Prologue. There has never been a time when any people has been without wise counsel and spiritual guidance. The old men and women, the shaman, medicine man, guru, priest, and philosopher have always existed in every community on the planet from time immemorial to the present. Some of these people have been remembered to us in history or in myth, and some have merely passed into eternity without a trace or, in rare cases, they have left behind their knowledge and teaching in written form. Throughout Asia for thousands of years, the many ethnic groups have appreciated the teachings of their saints and sages. The teachings of the great thinkers of China have been especially well considered. Confucius, of course, taught an ethic based on the 5 relationships: father and son, older brother and younger brother, ruler and subject, friend and friend, husband and wife. Understanding these 5 relationships and accepting one's position in life in regard to these relationships, has enabled the Chinese to live harmoniously with one another. China, being the great center of learning and culture in Asia for so many thousands of years, became like a magnet, drawing the attention of and aligning into mutual understanding with all neighboring countries. And so, it is to China we must look in order to best understand the culture and thinking of the other Asian countries and Asian peoples, because all East Asian countries, except for the Philippines, imitated the ancient Chinese and then built their own cultures upon a Chinese foundation. It is important to understand that there is nothing Chinese about the philosophies of China any more than there is anything Chinese about the invention of paper, movable type or gunpowder. Does a sheet of paper look Chinese to you? Of course not. These inventions are used every day by all peoples around the world without a second thought as to their Chinese origins. It is the same with the ideas and secrets that I have written below. Since they are mere ideas and knowledge and ways of doing things, anyone can do them. Just as anyone can write on a piece of paper or light a firecracker even if you aren't Chinese, so, too, can anyone use these hidden secrets of Oriental wealth even if you aren't an Oriental. And whether you are Oriental or not, the problems of life have always been the same for everyone, that is, getting enough to eat and a place to sleep. These problems are no different today than they were during the prehistoric caveman days. Whether a caveman hoarded in the depths of his dank cavern a magnificent fortune in bear skulls, colored pebbles and seashells, or the modern-day Jewish banker hoards in his vaults a fortune in colored paper and shiny metal, doesn't matter. Both are essentially the same pathetic desire, lust and greed. The clothes are different but the hearts are the same. All-devouring time changes many things but does not seem to have any effect at all upon the heart of man. Knowing this, the sages of ancient China tried to discover, of all the things in life, those things that were the very most valuable. It was obvious to these wise men that mere money, gems or gold were no more valuable than common sand except for the value that deluded men gave to these things. And so, they tried to understand what it was in life that everyone needed the most. They wished to know this so that the people would not be confused. After all, when a man is confused he makes foolish choices and suffers thereby. But when a man can see clearly, his choices in life are usually good and he prospers therefrom. Life can be either very complicated or very simple. It all depends upon your outlook. The ancient Chinese sages looked at life and looked at heaven and earth and realized that there were 7 essentials that were more valuable than anything else. Certainly, they concluded, these 7 essentials are far, far more valuable than any amount of money, land or sparkling jewels. These 7 essentials are something that everybody, without exception, needs and no one can do well without. Those who do not have these 7 essentials of life either die or they fall into the very lowest levels of society in hunger, misery and poverty. Unfortunately, today, there are people all over the world who do not have all 7 of these essentials of life. Often, this is merely because most people do not think about it for themselves. Most people wander through life as if in a daze, thinking falsely that they are alone, without aid, dependent upon their own efforts, instead of seeing how God gives them whatever they need even without asking, if they would only open their mind's eye and understand. To comprehend the very basic foundation of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth, you must understand the 7 essentials of life, what they are and how to get them for yourself. The 7 essentials of life are, air, water, food, clothing, shelter, spouse and children. Oh, that's nothing. You might be tempted to say. That's too simple and obvious. But think about it a little bit more and you will discover a vast storehouse of Oriental treasure hidden within your very own house, your very own mind and your very own heart. It is one of the amazing things about hidden treasure in that it is often buried in an obvious place, so obvious that no one would ever think of looking for it there. And this is one reason why so many Americans look upon the Asian people as having some hidden, secret source of wealth the origin of which they cannot find. And yet, the secret is right out in the open so that everyone who doesn't know where to look misses it. The 7 essentials of life are the basis for grasping in your own hands the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. They are the keys that open the hidden treasure house. Understand these keys, simple as they are, before moving on to the treasure house door that is in the following chapters. Chapter I: The 7 Essentials of Life. 1. The first essential of life is air. What banker or corporate millionaire or dictatorial despot would not give every penny of his vast fortune for just one more breath of air when he is on his deathbed, dying? The first thing you did when you came into the world at birth was to suck in a lungful of air. And then you cried, sucked in more and more air, and screamed in rage that fate had born you once again. Without air, no one lives for more than a few minutes. So, air is the most precious thing that we have in life. It is only the Asian people who truly understand how valuable is ordinary air. Truly, This is a treasure that is literally hidden under your very nose. Every great civilization of the ancient past flourished because of an intimate understanding of the power hidden in the very air. Qigong, the Chinese breathing techniques, and pranayama, the East Indian breathing techniques, are the best known examples of ancient breathing methods. The people in Western countries do not live life to its fullest because they are both mentally and physically deficient in their breathing of air. That is, for lack of sufficient oxygen, the brains of Western people are a little bit stupid. One of the greatest teachers of all time said, "Be ye as a little child." Part of his teaching was to call people's attention to the way a little children breathe air. Babies breath from the belly while adults breath from the lungs and throat. The Buddha was enlightened when he observed his breath while breathing like a little baby. And the great men and women of ancient Africa, Europe, India, Asia, as well as the Americas, all were proficient at this belly breathing method. The Druidic breath was one of the power secrets of pre-literate Europe but was lost when the Romans took over. Western peoples have many heart diseases and cancers as a result of their unmindful breathing techniques. The heart as well as all of the cells of the body need oxygen, while cancerous tumors thrive in low oxygen environments. Without oxygen, the brain does not function properly and falls into slothful, lazy and torpid thinking patterns. Blacks suffered disproportionately high mortality rates for many major causes of death compared with other groups, and Asian Americans had the lowest. From 1988 to 1990, for example, Asians 45 and older had the lowest death rates from heart disease. The rates were about 25% lower than those of Latinos and Native Americans, half that of whites, and 63% lower than that of blacks. All people who do not oxygenate their blood effectively will suffer from myriad diseases and early death. But you will not find any help from the doctors, who themselves die young from lack of knowledge. So, here is the method for breathing as Jesus, the Buddha, Lao Tzu and all of the saints and sages recommended that everyone should breath, like a little child. Pull up on your anus as you inhale, and the breath will, without strain, descend into the lungs. Pull up on your anus as you inhale with about as much strength as you use to blink your eyes. That's all there is to it. Stop reading for a moment and practice this breathing method for yourself. It's invisible and, even in a crowded room, only you will know how to do it, when and where. No doctor can do this breathing for you. In fact, no Western doctor even knows of the existence of this ancient breathing technique unless they have read my writings. So, how can a doctor be expected to help you stay alive, healthy and strong if you do not know how to breathe for yourself? If you are interested in an in-depth study of Qigong breathing and Kung Fu methods, write to the Chinese National Qigong Institute listed in the reference section. Essentially, at this basic breathing level of life, Westerners lose their sharpness of mind and their money, while the Oriental saves his own money, because those who do not know how to breathe from the belly like a baby soon sicken, spend their money on the doctors and hospitals, and then die. How can you be rich when you give all of your money away to the doctors just to stay alive? In addition, the Asian adept of this breathing method is far more alert and energetic than the Westerners who breathe like Westerners. The only necessary action after learning this knowledge is to practice the technique. Learning the method is not difficult, but overcoming a lifetime of improper breathing patterns will take genuine practice and effort on your part. So practice whenever you can, standing in an elevator, sitting in a car, lying in bed or walking down the road. This breathing method is the basis of meditation, Kung Fu and Qigong. By concentrating on your breath, you focus your mind and attain a state of physical well-being and mental bliss. Those who want to do well in scholastic achievements and mental work of all kinds, knowing and practicing this breathing technique, can now compete equally with Oriental people in the Western schools, universities and scientific laboratories. Although Asians represent 6% of the California population and 2% of the U.S. population, they make up 26.5% of the University of California, Berkeley's freshman class, 33% at UC Irvine, and 8% to 19% of freshmen at Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Brown, Yale and MIT. It takes calm thinking and deep breathing to properly oxygenate the body and the brain. So breathe deep into your belly like a baby. You will feel nice and comfortable and fully alert once you get the hang of it. While the Westerner pants like a dog when he breathes, the Oriental breathes deeply into his diaphragm like a cat. Abdominal breathing ventilates and cools the body, so one need not sweat as much as a chest breather sweats. And this is very nice. It makes for calm thinking and an excellent kind of health unknown to Western doctors. Thus, with good health you can enjoy the money that you will be making from the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. 2. The second essential of life is water. Without water, no one lives for more than a few days, perhaps a week. So, water is the next most important thing in life. And like air, Western people take water for granted as something beneath their notice. Led into unhealthy habits by the advertising of the American junk food industry, the average American in 1987 drank 486 cans of soda pop, 5. And this is only an average. A can of Pepsi-Cola contains 10 teaspoons of sugar. A can of Shasta orange soda contains 12 teaspoons of sugar. Sugar is what I call one of the 5 edible poisons. The other 4 are white flour, food additives, such as NutraSweet and MSG, caffeine and alcohol. What this means is that the average American can never attain good health without understanding the second essential of life. Water is pure and healthful, but to substitute something as deleterious as sugared soda pop or alcoholic beverages is inviting what is not life to enter the domain of your body. If you multiply what all of these sugared soft drinks cost versus the few pennies that a cup of tea costs, you will see a big savings that the Western people lose while the Asian people gain. There is more caffeine per cup of coffee than per cup of tea. And coffee adds $6 billion import dollars to the American trade deficit every year and contains more than 800 known toxins. While a Westerner poisons his system and depletes his money supply by drinking unhealthy and expensive soft drinks, coffee, booze and various canned and bottled beverages, the Oriental prefers cheap, delicious and healthful tea or hot water. While the average pop drinker cited above is spending $243 per year on cokes, not counting dental and doctor bills and medications to fight the inevitable tooth decay, colds and flu bugs such a consumer would have, the average Asian is enjoying his cup of tea and putting $243 more in the piggy bank than does the average American. So, if you are interested in being as rich as the Asian people, use this hidden secret of Oriental wealth and stop wasting your money on expensive and poisonous beverages. Do you think that it is only a coincidence that the sellers of the junk food that rots your teeth and destroys your health attend the same synagogue as the doctors who repair your teeth and treat your diseases? Coincidence or conspiracy is a matter of perspective. The Jews say it's a coincidence, but I call it a conspiracy. And I have a right to my opinion, like it or not. 3. The third essential of life is food. After air and water, you need food more than anything else. Without food, you will die in a couple of weeks or a month. And this is where so many Orientals begin to surpass the people of the West in health, happiness and lots of money. Asians eat wholesome and delicious food that costs a fraction of what Western people pay for their food. Those who have poor quality food have poor health as well as slow, torpid minds and minds filled full of unhappy thoughts and baseless fears. So, if you wonder why Westerners can't figure out how the Oriental people make their fortunes, perhaps it is instructive to look at the low qualities of food that Americans eat, which produces a low quality of thinking. In America, the people eat garbage. In fact, the dogs and cats, cattle and pigs, are fed better quality food than Americans feed to their own children. The reason for this is that while the average American wants his dog or cat to be healthy, it seems to be good enough that the child only be fed. What they are fed doesn't seem to matter much as long as it's advertised somewhere and is fitted into a flashy package or a tin can. And, true to form, a vast multi-billion-dollar junk food industry has sprung up designed, like all industries, to make the highest possible profit. To make the highest profit means to cut overhead costs. And if it is cheaper to use some synthetic crap as a substitute for farm-grown food, then that's what is done. Profits first and people second, seems to be the food industry's motto. As one example, Americans spend $12 billion per year on French fries. An American family of 4 spends between $80 and $150 per week on food depending on thriftiness or liberality. 8. The strange thing is, neither of these average American families is eating good food. The poor family eats cheap junk food and the rich family eats expensive junk food. But an Asian family of 4 eats the most delicious, succulent and healthy food you can buy for between $40 and $75 per week depending on their thriftiness. Thus, because of better quality food, the Asian family is not only healthier, more energetic and mentally alert than the average American but has somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 more dollars hidden under the floorboards at the end of the year because of this savings on food expenses. Let's use breakfast cereal as an example. If you cost the so-called food in the average box of breakfast cereal, you will see that there is about 1 cent's worth of devitalized grain. This 1 cent also covers the cost of the poisons that Americans feed to their kids, the sugar, white flour, flavorings and various gums and glues and chemicals. The other $1.99 that is the cost of this box of breakfast cereal is actually the cost of the store's electric lights, mortgage payment, insurance, wages and profits plus the shipper's diesel costs, truck payments, insurance, wages, profits, plus the manufacturer's electric and fuel costs, factory lease and mortgage payments, insurance, wages, the cost of cardboard and printing on the box, profits and advertising. All of these things and many things more are added onto the cost of that box of cereal for which the consumer has to pay. The advertising costs tell an interesting story by themselves. The top 5 advertising spenders in America in 1991 were at $495.5 million, then McDonald's at $446.3 million, then Kellogg's Cereals at $410.4 million, then Sears at $337.5 million and Ford at $337.5 million. 9. Two of the nation's major junk food distributors are in the top 3 advertising spenders. These are only the highest spenders, while thousands of other smaller junk food purveyors annually spend more hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to convince consumers to gobble up their products, and then to go out and buy more. All of these advertising dollars must be earned back in order for these businesses to make a profit. This is why you get 1 penny's worth of food in every box of cereal. And even that 1 penny's worth is of the lowest quality, like substituting gold ore for real gold. The average Westerners, especially Americans, raised up as boob-tube zombies, will never have a chance of understanding the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth because they are not thinkers. They are hardly even human beings. They are mere consumers and proud of it. Like pigs and chickens and cows, they spend their lives gobbling up whatever is thrown their way by the corporate food merchandisers who are, by the way, in business not to feed people but to make money. And with all of the money that these consumers spend, each and every one of them is getting cheated by the merchants. While walking through any supermarket in America, I can instantly tell which of the women watch television and how much television they watch merely by seeing what they have in their shopping baskets. The women who watch the most television stock up on all the goods that they see advertised on the boob tube and nothing else. Any other choice they leave on the market shelf, especially choices that require nutritional knowledge, actual thinking with their stupid little soap opera minds, or even the reading of labels and ingredients. Their children are screaming, ill-behaved, snot-nosed, truculent, unhealthy and unhappy little tykes who are being poisoned with hyperactive inducing sugar, white flour and chocolate by their ignorant mothers. Their hyperactive and sugar-depressed families argue and fight often and grow up as strangers because they have spent their lives watching the televised ghosts and brainwashing commercials on the electric Jew and have never taken the time, the actual time, to know one another as more than just cohabitants of the same living space. These are consumers. They have been trained by the commercials to always be unhappy so that they can only find fulfillment in life by buying something, buying anything, as advertised. These kinds of people are true victims of the Jewish commercial culture in America. And yet, they don't have to be this way if they only knew the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. What follows, is why some of the Oriental secrets are hidden in an obvious place, if only you would think about it. If you compare food with gold ore, you may or may not find yourself with a bargain. For example, a man who sells both gold and gold ore finds himself a fool and makes that fool a good deal. He says to the fool, "I have here 1 ounce of gold that I can sell to you for $400, but look and see, it only weighs 1 measly ounce. However, if you buy this whole, enormous ton of gold ore, you get the whole ton for the same $400. A whole ton. Weigh it. Count it, son. A whole ton of gold ore for only $400. The fool sees that the big pile of gold ore weighs a lot more than the mere 1 ounce of gold and so falls for the deal and drags his ton of gold ore home thinking that he is now very wealthy. After all, the gold ore weighs a whole ton and he got it all for the same price as a little ounce of pure gold. But after extracting the gold from the gold ore, the fool finds that he has only 1 cent's worth of pure gold. Oh, the tricky seller told the truth, all right. It was, indeed, a ton of gold ore. But there was only 1 penny's worth of pure gold inside all of the dirt and rocks. So, the fool traded $400 for 1 penny hidden in a ton of dirt while passing up the opportunity to trade his $400 for a fair ounce of pure gold. Most Westerners, and especially Americans, are like the fool when it comes to nutrition and the food that they buy from the wily food merchants. Like the stupid woman who spends $2 for a box of breakfast cereal to feed her starving children and her hard-working husband, she is buying a pile of garbage with only a little nutrition hidden inside. If you could weigh nutrition like you weigh gold ore, you will find that hot dogs cost about $80 per pound, breakfast cereal nutritionally costs about $5,000 per pound because these foolish people are buying the gold ore and not the gold. Oh, but if I buy food in the health food stores, it just costs too much, I have heard some women complain. It is true that the health food stores are charging far too much for the food that they sell because there are so few wise people who buy from them versus all of the fools who shop at the chain stores that they have to charge a lot in order to stay in business. But at the same time, they are selling pure gold and not mere gold ore like is found in the big chain supermarkets. But the Oriental people become healthier and richer by avoiding both of these traps: the lousy food and outright garbage that is sold in the shiny boxes and tins in the supermarkets on the one hand, and the high-priced health foods that are sold in the natural food stores on the other hand. Oriental cooking is natural cooking. In the first place, food is what is naturally grown on the earth under the sunlight. To harvest this fresh from the farm or garden is best, and it is the cheapest way. What does it cost to grow a carrot? Or a squash? Not very much if water and sunlight are free. For example, if you want a good breakfast cereal, cook up some brown rice. Eat it either hot or cold with milk, soy milk or butter, blackstrap molasses or honey. 35 cents worth of brown rice will feed breakfast to 5 or more people. I will not cover this subject in detail here. There are plenty of cookbooks and natural food stores where great natural recipes can be found. But to sum up, I would like to mention 2 important reasons why the Asian people can eat far cheaper, healthier and more delicious food than can Westerners. The first reason is the difference between bread versus rice. In the West, bread is known as the staff of life. But the merchants steal the people's very lives away by selling white flour bread. White bread is nothing but junk food. Any youngster can prove this in his school science project by feeding one set of rats nothing but white bread and water and another set of rats whole wheat bread and water, just to see which ones sicken and die. Of course, rice is the staff of life for the Oriental people. Like white bread versus whole wheat bread, white rice is not as healthy as brown rice. If you compare the two, rice, especially brown rice, is cheaper and healthier than bread. Here's why. In the first place, a 1-pound loaf of bread in the store is mainly 1 pound of water. That's what makes it moist. But a pound of rice is nothing but rice. You add water to it to make it eatable. So, the Oriental is, once again, ahead of the Westerner when he spends his money on the most basic food item. He gets a full and honest weight and price for his rice, while his Western brother is paying a premium price for his moist and devitalized white bread, the price of which also includes the baker's milling costs, salary, electric lights, oven fuel expense, insurance, freight, packaging, etc., etc. So, the cost of bread to the Westerner is like buying gold ore instead of gold. Especially is white bread nothing but a glob of junk food. The price might seem cheap, but it is still a bad deal. It takes ovens and bakers to prepare this staff of life. In other words, the Westerner has to pay middlemen before he gets to eat. And when he eats white bread or donuts and cakes, he is eating garbage. But the Oriental who buys a pound of rice, takes it home and cooks it without paying anyone else to prepare it for him. The pound of dry rice when cooked makes about 4 pounds of moist rice. At this writing, a 1.5-pound loaf of the best sprouted, whole wheat bread in the store costs $2.25, while a pound of brown rice costs only 35 cents, which, when cooked, weighs 4 pounds. And so, the Westerner pays about 17 times more money to feed himself with bread than the Oriental spends to feed himself with rice. It is a false Western assumption that rice is cheaper, is less nutritious and of lower quality than bread. And the Western fools who think this, are the same fools who wonder why the Oriental has more money than do they. Especially, are poor people victims of the Jewish junk food conspiracy. Led on by flashy packages and mesmerizing TV commercials, the poor people believe that these false images will not only give them good food but will also give them popularity and social status. After all, if a famous, highly paid athlete or movie star doing a commercial, drinks a poisonous Coke or grins as they gobble down an artery-clogging snack, then the poor people want to be just like them. Stand in the checkout lines in the neighborhood markets of any American slum or barrio and you can see for yourself the poor, unhealthy, and impoverished Americans spending their hard-earned money on flashy packages containing nothing but lies and empty calories. These same poor people die younger, suffer more illness and tooth decay without being able to afford medical help. They undergo more violence, misery, depression, alcoholism, drug use and anger than do the rich. But this is not because they are poor. It is because they eat junk foods and starve their bodies and minds of necessary nutritional energy. Junk food seems cheap just as a desert mirage seems like real water. But its cost in human suffering is beyond estimation. And yet, such an economic system thrives because there are those who make a religion out of profiting from other people's foolishness, pain and misery. Once again, there is gold and there is gold ore. It is better to choose the gold. Choose whole wheat bread and brown rice over white bread or white rice if you have the choice. If you don't have the choice, then buy whole wheat flour and make chapatis or tortillas. And choose rice over bread if you wish to understand and to prosper from the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. And remember, the white people of Europe did not grow strong and fierce on bread. They became mighty by eating porridge-cracked wheat, barley and peas. The second reason Asians can eat more cheaply than Westerners is the difference between vegetables versus meat. In the United States, about 2/3 of the harvested acreage is used to grow food for livestock. To produce 1 pound of meat protein, one must feed cattle 16 pounds of grain, pigs, 6 pounds of grain, turkeys, 4 pounds, and chickens, 3 pounds. 10. This is one reason meat is so much more expensive to eat than grain. According to the same source, the world produces enough grain to give every man, woman and child 2 pounds of grain per day, far more than a person can eat. So, why is the American diet so skewed toward artery-clogging meat consumption rather than toward healthful grain consumption? Because the grain cartels make more money fattening cattle and chickens for market than they do by feeding people. Besides, their core religionists are doctors and need the business. All food comes from the interaction between the sunlight and the earth. It costs very little to produce food from the fields and farms because nature does most of the work, the growing. All man need do is tend the fields and orchards and understand how to work in harmony with nature. The only people in America of whom I know who understand this natural principle are the hippies, the Amish and the people who publish Organic Gardening magazine and Prevention, as well as the people who publish The Gardens Alive Organic Catalog, see reference section. Other than these few, there is not much knowledge of natural gardening methods left in America. It is all poison control and hormone therapy type of farming. That is to say, it is all money first and people second farming and marketing. This is unfortunate because without an understanding of the natural way of life, the Western peoples will sicken and die and never understand the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. For example, a single steak that a Westerner eats with his mashed potatoes is used in the Oriental cuisine chopped up into pieces. Thus, stir-fried or sautéed, or diced into stews, this same steak feeds 8 people along with the rice and vegetable plates. The meat in an Oriental dish is used more for flavoring than for filling you up. To get filled up is the role of the rice, and the various vegetable courses. Mankind was originally a vegetarian and we have the tooth structure and digestive organs to prove it. A person needs very little meat. Thus, 8 Oriental people eat a delicious, healthful and filling meal for about the same price as a single American consumes with his expensive steak. And when brown rice is combined with any of the beans, peas or lentils or with soybean products like tofu, then such a vegetarian meal contains cheaper, better quality and healthier protein than the very best of steaks. Beans and grains make perfect protein. But in America, the grains are fed to the animals who, thus, eat a much better quality food than do the American people. The animals are fed the gold to make them plump and healthy for a profitable market price, while the people are fed the gold or to extract from them the highest possible profit whether they are healthy or not. It's a clever swindle. But it is not a swindle into which an Asian is likely to fall. Chinese, Korean and Vietnamese markets do not exist merely to serve Oriental tastes. They exist to feed Oriental people. And while the Jews who own and control the grain and meat cartels celebrate the thefts and swindles of Joseph who starved the Egyptians into poverty and slavery, and while the history books describe the fake famine that the Jews engineered in order to foment the French Revolution of 1795 and to maintain their Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, the Asians are immune to such market manipulations. 50-pound sacks of rice can be stored in a closet or basement for many years if kept cool and dry. Rather than rely on a marketing system that can be purposely crashed in order to create panic and chaos, Asians' homes are well stocked with rice and other provisions. And so, while the hungry white and black people riot because of an engineered food crisis, the Oriental people merely close the window curtains and remain safely at home. And so, you can see that with food, the third essential of life, the Oriental people save 17 times more money when they buy their staff of life than do Westerners, and they can feed 8 times more people for the same amount of money by using Oriental cooking recipes and methods. And this has nothing to do with being either Oriental or rich. Even the poorest hobo living under a bridge can eat like a king on delicious, cheap and healthful rice, beans and vegetables. In addition, the use of the wok, that iron or steel, semi-spherical cooking vessel that is found in every Oriental kitchen, saves on the cost of fuel whether electric or gas. Because of its shape, it transfers the heat from the source to the food more efficiently than the flat-bottomed cooking vessels of the West. So, once again, the Oriental gains more money by saving on the cost of cooking fuel. An old Chinese joke says that to be happiest in life, live in a big American-style house, marry a Japanese wife, and eat Chinese food. American homes are roomy and comfortable, Japanese women are subservient and do what they are told to do, and Chinese food is the best in the world. Anyway, you get the idea by now, I am sure. Western people waste their money in the restaurants and supermarkets. They do not get full value for their money but spend it on flashy packaging containing junk food of low nutritional value. When you compare an American family of 4 that spends $150 per week on food, what do they have in the end? They have 4 people who have eaten what they've seen on TV, and since they are hungry at the end of the week, they spend another $150 again and again and again every week of the year. However, a family of 4 Asian people following the methods of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth feed their entire family for about $40 to $75 per week. This makes them healthy, well-fed and richer every week than those people who do not use the Oriental methods. For those of you who do not believe that it is possible to feed a family of 4 for less than $2.50 per meal, I have included my special one-pot cooking method for you to try. You will find it in Chapter 8. So, by now, I hope that you understand. Orientals have more money than do Westerners beginning at these very basic levels of life. The Westerner pays high prices for what the manufacturers call food but which is, in reality, empty calories and sickness-producing junk food. But the wise Oriental gets a true value for his money because he buys real food that has not been devalued of nutrition and inflated in price by the middlemen and swindlers of the Jewish food industry. The Asian eats better quality food at a lower price and is, thus, doubly rich. This is not a very difficult thing to understand. But it is amazing how many Americans will shake their fists and knit their angry brows when they see Orientals who are better off materially than they are. These same Americans also gulp down their gold door pizzas, burgers, fries and cokes and make fun of those stupid rice eaters. I think it's kind of funny, too. But the joke isn't on us rice eaters. 4. The fourth essential of life is clothes. To keep off the sun and keep in the body heat and to cover your nakedness, clothes are the next most essential thing in life. In America, clothes are not much of a problem since they are so plentiful that even the bums in the street are usually well dressed even if they are covered with dirt. There are plenty of clothes for everybody. In fact, there are more than enough clothes to go around because the Jewish fashion industry convinces many people to waste their money by throwing away their good clothes and buying a new set every 6 months for the sake of that fraud known as the latest fashion. What is amazing to me is that people are so brainwashed by the fashion industry that they are willing to spend huge sums on simple clothing merely as a status symbol. I can assure you that the clothes sold at thrift stores, Goodwill, Salvation Army, etc., are really quite good and certainly 100 times cheaper than what is found in the fashion shops. For those of you who are interested in becoming richer, then I recommend that you be frugal and forget about the falseness of fashion. Save your money by shopping in thrift shops and second-hand stores. And never buy anything that has to be dry cleaned. A Chinese gentleman dressed in $5 worth of second-hand clothes is $200 richer than a Western idiot dressed in $205 worth of designer fleece and flim-flam. And while the Westerner is working overtime to pay for expensive clothes, the Chinese gentleman is investing his $200 in some worthwhile enterprise that will make him another $2,000 or $20,000 or $200,000. A penny saved is a penny earned, is another fine old saying that Americans seem to have forgotten soon after Benjamin Franklin passed away. But frugality has always been one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. Frugality is not a part of what the big merchants and bankers in the West desire of the consuming public. What these parasites desire is for everyone to be in debt to them for the sake of usury. The charge cards, loan companies, banks, mortgage companies and buy now pay later methods of finance, are for Western fools. They are not for the Oriental man or woman who desires to gain a monetary advancement in life. When Oriental people need to borrow money, they usually do not borrow from the bank. Why? Because it is like throwing the interest payments away. You never see it again. But when you borrow from family or benevolent associations, either the loan is interest-free or, if there is interest, it is like paying it to yourself. This is one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. Also, if you cannot pay cash for something, then save your money until you can. Or use the secrets in Chapter 6 and 7. This is especially good advice for buying clothes. People who go into debt on a charge card merely to buy something to cover themselves should not be upset when the Oriental prefers utilitarianism to extravagance. Let the fools wear the latest fashion on their way to the poorhouse. An Asian does not let these illusions hinder him. While the Western tart is spending her husband's hard-earned money on clothes for herself, her Oriental sister is spending her husband's hard-earned money on her family. That is, the Western woman makes herself prettier and her family poorer while her Oriental sister makes do with her own natural beauty as she makes her family richer with her frugality. And frugality is one of the basic secrets of Oriental wealth. It's the same old story of the grasshopper and the ant all over again, gaining wealth through slow accumulation of savings. And if you don't have enough to save, then don't worry, we've thought of that, too. Study the chapters on loan clubs and the game of chairs. 5. The fifth essential of life is shelter. At this level, you would do well to look around a bit to see where you are. There are many bums and hobos and street people in America who have solved the first 4 problems of the essentials of life. This essential of shelter is also the borderline between living as a nomad or as a civilized person. The street people and bums have attained the first 4 essentials of life: air, water, usually substituted by whiskey or wine, food and clothing. In general, this is all that is required for anyone to eke out some sort of an existence. When the weather gets nasty, then finding some sort of shelter, such as a doorway or under a bridge, is necessary. But for those of us who prefer more civilized ways, a house or apartment of some kind is very important. Once a person can make the kind of living to have more wealth left over from his labors, his food and his clothing requirements, then he can begin looking for some kind of shelter: a house, apartment, lean-to, teepee, tent, shed, shack, tenement, mansion, penthouse or castle. To a Westerner, it all depends upon how much money he makes to determine in what kind of shelter he can afford to live. But to an Oriental, money is second in importance. What is of first importance is the relationship that he has with his family, because the family is the basis of all civilization. The Jew commies also know this, which is why most of what is presented on television is designed to destroy family cohesion and harmony. As the family is weakened and destroyed, so too is the country. In America, the Jewish bankers own everything, including the Federal Reserve Bank and the elected politicians. And since the bankers and big money boys want to keep their properties inflating in value, they, through their paid lobbyists and shoe-licking politicians, have passed laws that make it illegal to be happy without paying the banker's mortgage fee. After all, how does a banker make money? Except by usury on a loan? He certainly doesn't make much by giving you 4% interest on your savings deposit. Only when he loans your savings deposit to someone else at 18% interest does he profit. The bigger the loan, the more profit to the banker. And so, 10,000 zoning, construction, health and safety laws have been passed, all of which add to the expense of a building, to make sure that people are prevented from living for free or for cheap in a lean-to, teepee, tent, shed or shack or house of their own construction. This prevents most people from realizing that the American Indian lived in this country for thousands of years perfectly comfortable without requiring a split-level, air-conditioned, fully electric penthouse with jacuzzi. But since most people in America want these things, then why not? If you want to own your own house or even many houses, you can do it by using the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. You, too, can be a landlord. Beginning with buying a single house, you can have $1 million in cash equity in 10 years. For between $5,000 and $8,000 for a down payment, a reasonably good credit report, the Resolution Trust Corporation of the federal government will sell you a house at 10 to 15% below appraised market value. If you buy a small house in the bottom end of the housing market in a fairly good neighborhood, you can rent it out. After 1 year, take out a second loan on that house and buy another house. Rent that house and repeat the process every year. Using this method, after 10 years, you will have $1 million in cash, if you so desire. This is the American way of becoming a wealthy landlord. This is why slumlords make money. By buying the buildings at the bottom end of the market, they are buying the most stable properties. After all, it can't depreciate more than it already has by being at the bottom. And because people are forced by the bankers' laws from living for free in the streets, the slums are usually rented out by people who will take any shelter if it's cheap enough. So, the slumlords can't lose. Typically, poor families spend about 77% of their income on shelter. One of the Chinese tips that I can give to you if you want to become a landlord using the above method and rent your property to others is this: rent the part of the property or properties that will pay the highest rent to you while you live in the poorest part. By renting the best to others, you will gain more money. By living in the poorest part yourself, not only will you save money, but you will not gain the enmity of the renters if they think that you are living expensively off of their labors. After all, by living in the poorest part, you appear poorer than they are and so gain their empathy and not such grudging rent payments. You can best live high by first living low. But what if you don't have the initial $5,000 to $8,000? Using the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth, the solution to this problem is simple. It doesn't take a lot of money to buy a house, all it takes is a lot of people. This is where the Asian people leave the Westerners behind in the dust. While a Westerner demands a big house all for himself and his immediate family, the Asian is eager to share what he has with relatives. An American man might work his entire life just to pay the banker or the mortgage company for the privilege of living in an overpriced stucco box with a double garage. But regardless of the price of a house, an Asian prefers to spread the expense and ease the burden. If you have 10 Asians scrubbing toilets and washing dishes for minimum wage, but they are all living in the same house, they will soon own that house. While an Asian understands teamwork and the sharing of burdens, the individualistic Westerner only knows how to please himself. This is unfortunate. 10 people who buy a house together have something to show for their efforts. Whether they sell the house in 5 years or 25 years or keep it in their family forever doesn't matter. They are richer than the Western fools who do not know how to live together harmoniously in the same house. Perhaps the single, Western man and his wife and kids who buy a house will lose everything. If the man is out of work and can't make the payments, the banker seizes the property. This is, by the way, why the bankers engineer inflations and depressions. The Great Depression of 1929 was a purposely created disaster designed to enrich the Jewish bankers and financiers at the expense of everyone else. They were able to buy a lot of industries and properties for pennies on the dollar while the Jewish media put the blame everywhere but where it belonged. People buy houses during boom times and pay the banker for a big mortgage. So, the banker profits and wins. Then a depression or recession is cycled in. The home buyer can't pay the mortgage, so the banker seizes the house in foreclosure. And the banker profits and wins again. But losing one's property to a banker is very rare with an Oriental. If 1 or 2 Asians are out of work, the others will take up the slack until better times. Meanwhile, they make their payments and keep control of their own property. So, you may ask, how do the Oriental people live harmoniously together under the same roof? By trying. It takes effort and courtesy to not step on your neighbor's toes. And if everyone tries, then the effort is not great and success is inevitable. It helps to read what Confucius and Mencius had to say about man, family and duty. It isn't so difficult even with only a little effort. Thus, the Oriental people prosper even in tough times because they spread their house investment among many people. Even if not everyone lives in the house, there is always relatives or friends who will help buy into a house with another. They will then be assured of making a good investment because their equity will be repaid if the house is resold, and they can borrow money from one another on their equity in order to make investments in other areas. So, you see, there is really no such thing as a poor Asian. All Asians are rich not so much because of money but because of relatives who trust one another and invest in each other's businesses and properties. If you find a poor Asian somewhere wandering the streets, either he is mentally deranged or he is an orphan without relatives. Unlike the American who is thrown out into the cruel world to either live or die all alone, the Asian people live by the saying, if one has food, all have food. If one is warm, all are warm. And this is why so many people are living in the streets of America. On the one hand, the Jewish bankers have warped the society by persuading the corrupt politicians to pass laws making it illegal to build and to live in whatever makes you content. Rather, they want everybody to live in what they call affordable housing built to code. What this means is that the bankers can afford to sell it at a profit no matter how flimsy its construction. And it is built to a code that decrees that it is only sturdy enough to last the 20 or 30 years of its mortgage, whereupon it is time to buy another house, built to code as cheaply as possible, under another bank loan at the highest interest the banker can get away with. It's a clever swindle, and the Jewish bankers have been getting away with it for centuries. And on the other hand, there are so many street people because the people themselves do not know how precious beyond value are their relatives. A Chinese might be very wealthy, but unless he has relatives with whom to share his wealth, he feels very poor. With the Chinese, the more you give, the more you have. This is not mere philosophy but is actually good business sense. When you share your wealth and invest in another relative's business, all of this comes back to you plus much more in the years ahead. And so, if you want to own a house and build your wealth, not rent or lease, which is like throwing your money away, then use the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth and buy a house together among friends and relatives. Whether you are a hippie commune, a black Muslim fraternity, a Christian brotherhood, an apple pie American family or whatever, put aside your individual desires and realize that a house divided against itself cannot stand. No harmony, and you will know both peace and prosperity. And now, here is another way that Asians save money. While an American couple might both work to pay for their house, they put their children out to child care. All of this costs more money. In California, nannies for working parents cost $700 to $1,400 for live-ins. For a 10-hour-a-day nanny who lives out, the cost is $1,200 to $1,800 per month. Babysitters from illegal aliens cost from $4 per hour to $8 per hour, sometimes $12 per hour if the working parents are rich. The Asian avoids this because it is the joy and duty of the old people as well as aunts and uncles to care for the little ones when the parents are away. Saving on babysitting and daycare expenses simple when the grandparents live in the same house as you. While the American family is poorer by $8,000 to $20,000 per year on childcare while both parents work so as to pay the Jewish banker, the Asian family keeps its money intact. Thus, while slaving away, the American family falls behind. But with no effort at all, the Asian family moves ahead. This is a simple to understand secret of Oriental wealth. Besides, this is how to raise intelligent kids who have had the experience of the wise counsel from many caring relatives to draw upon. And on the other hand, the expense of caring for the old folks is reduced because instead of sending them off to the old folks' home, they can stay among their loving family until they die. This is the natural way. Unlike the Westerners who spend thousands of dollars on child care or old folks' homes for their parents, all of this money is saved because everyone helps one another with the burdens of life. The old help the young, and when the young grow up, they in turn help the elderly. And so, Westerners should not be angry that Oriental people are wealthier than they, because it is a matter of following the ancient and holy commandment. Honor thy father and thy mother. And if anyone asks, am I my brother's keeper? Then you should answer, yes. Because you and your brother are richer and stronger together than either of you are alone. The only American expression of this Chinese idea that I have found in this country is the famous little statue at Boys Town, Nebraska, depicting a little boy carrying his tiny brother on his back. The caption is, "He ain't heavy. He's my brother." If the Western people cannot follow this kind of teaching even from their own Christian heritage, then they are no better than animals. And it is fitting that the animals live out in the weather, alone and hungry, uncaring and uncared for. Such teachings have been a part of Western culture for centuries, but it takes courage and strength to follow them. Americans, deprived of religious instruction by a corrupted government, are afraid of old age and death. And in their cowardice, they refuse to help the elderly because they are afraid to face what they, themselves, will be someday. Americans have been cheated by the evil lawyers, judges and bankers. They have actually accepted as true the false lawyers' reading of the First Amendment to the Constitution. Americans, who have been deceived by that communist front known as the ACLU, have overlooked the fact that the government has no rights whatsoever in religious matters. But why would the leftist Jews of the American Civil Liberties Union want to destroy religion? Because people without religious morals are easier to dominate and less likely to rebel against oppression. Just ask anyone who has ever said anything against the Jews and you will certainly learn what oppression is all about. Anyway, if you want more wealth, you don't have to get it all by yourself if you have friends and relatives to help you. This simple secret is only a mystery to Westerners because they all selfishly want to be kings of their own property without having the humility necessary to share what they have with their parents, brothers, cousins, uncles and grandparents. Thus, they grow poorer and lonelier through inflation, taxes and age, while the Asian peoples who follow the ancient teachings grow wealthier. Jesus taught to Westerners the power inherent in group sharing when he divided the loaves and fishes. But the later Christians didn't understand and called it a miracle. It's no miracle because what I do, ye too can do, and some things greater. It is only a hidden secret of Oriental wealth. When you share with your friends and relatives, you don't end up with less, you end up with more. I will use money as an example, although loaves and fishes or pans of rice or anything else will equally suffice. Suppose 3 friends decide to divide their money. One man has 2 cents, another has $1, another has $200 and a penny. Equally divided, it comes out to $67.01 each. Of course, the man with 2 cents is richer as is the man who only had $1, but the strange thing is, the man who had the $200 is richer, also, because now he also has 2 friends and allies. And these 2 friends, who will give him whatever money he wants or needs, still have his money, so it hasn't really gone anywhere. He's as rich as he was before, and in addition he has 2 friends who will help him through life's troubles as the 3 of them continually divide and share their earnings. And since they will each have different amounts of money at different times, none of them will ever be poor even if he is out of work or falls ill. Thus, the average Asian is always richer than the average Westerner merely by knowing how to share with his family and friends. This is the way we will be thinking when I tell you about the loan clubs and the game of chairs later in this book. In the West, especially in the United States, it is every man for himself, a dog-eat-dog world where only the strong survive. This is okay if you are a dog. But if you are a human being, then the Oriental way is a much better way for people to live. Let's compare 2 families of 7 each, an American family and an Oriental family, each consisting of 2 grandparents, a father, a mother, 1 boy child and 1 girl child each. The money amounts listed are only examples and can be any amount. So, do some calculating and figure it out regarding your own situation. As an example, first look at the American nuclear family. The grandparents live in their own house which costs, let's say, $500 per year in taxes since they own it. The father and mother live in a different town in a rented house costing $1,000 per month. Each is paying out this money for their shelter, money that will never come back to them, while also wasting money on the junk food that they eat as well as for child care. When the boy grows up, he is expected to move out to find his own place at perhaps $250 per month for a shared apartment with a roommate, while the girl marries and moves away with her husband to yet another location. In all, this Western family is paying a total of $15,500 per year for their shelter, whether as house, apartment or condo. This goes on year after year. On the other hand, the Oriental extended family tries to live a life of harmony within their family. If the grandparents already own their home and pay $500 per year in taxes, then why pay more? The parents live with the grandparents, as do their two children. If the girl child marries and leaves to her husband's house, that's okay. But the $500 per year in taxes is all that this Oriental family pays for their shelter, while putting the other $15,000 behind the closet wall. Depositing money in the bank is not the Chinese way. If the bank knows how much you have, then so does the tax man. And the cash is not readily available for those quick deals that come along. At the end of the year, every year, the Oriental family has $15,000 more than the American nuclear family, plus the several $1,000s more that they save from buying real food instead of junk food. Plus the money saved on daycare for the kids. This is money that they can use to buy their own house if they want, or, after a few years of living together, they can pay cash for any house that they like. Or invest it in a business to make even more. Meanwhile, the American nuclear family, each member trying to get something for himself, ends up having nothing at all. The rents paid to the landlord and to the bankers are gone and will never return to them. They are working just to stay alive and pay the rent. They will never move ahead in the monetary world as easily as does the extended, Oriental family, because they do not understand the concept of teamwork. Study these pictures taken of typical houses in Cupertino, California. House A was built without any kind of future in mind. It was designed for a married couple who might have a child or two, but that is as far into the future as the designers or that American couple could think. House B, on the same block, started as an equally small house. But as the family grew in size, a second story was added to accommodate the parents and children. When American families get larger, either they sell out and move to a bigger house, or they build a few more rooms, or they convert a garage to more living space. This is thinking ahead, but not thinking very far ahead. House C is a typical Chinese house on the same block. The tiny American house that was on the lot was torn down and this huge, extended family structure was built in its place. While the little American bungalows are built on a cement slab, the Chinese houses have large basements for storage of extra food, commercial goods and extra relatives. These houses are built for extended families, for the increasing of wealth and for a multi-generational ownership. The two-car garage allows for private parking and for the transfer of commercial goods out of sight of the neighbors. And because cars are often bought by several people who share the driving of them, it is frequent to see Asian families having two Mercedes or other super expensive automobiles which each individual could not afford by himself. While an American family can barely afford an ordinary car since only one person buys one car, the Asian family can afford several expensive cars since it is seen not only as a status symbol but as an investment of many family members chipping in to buy a luxury vehicle. When the owners of the small American homes die, the relatives sell the property which passes out of the hands of the family. When the owners of the Chinese houses die, the extended family remains in residence. Thus, entire blocks of American houses, over a single generation, are transferred to Chinese ownership from which it will never again be allowed into non-Chinese hands. By thinking in terms of extended families over many generations, the Chinese outlast all other people. It is not survival of the fittest but survival of the smartest. And as the black person stated in the introduction, they don't really bother anyone. They just crowd you out. Until finally, as in Photo D, all of the houses are built to Chinese specifications. To an American, teamwork is something that is only applied to playing games like baseball or basketball or ice hockey. But it is teamwork that makes great civilizations, too. A house divided against itself cannot stand. But a house of people living peacefully with one another can accomplish anything. 6. The sixth essential of life is a spouse. And now look around again. You have managed to solve the problems of getting enough to eat and a place to live and sleep. It is time to start thinking about a spouse and raising a family. If you are a monk or nun or holy hermit, then this does not apply to you since love of God is sufficient in your case. But everyone else should consider carefully what follows. No one who cannot solve the first 5 essentials of life can possibly think about getting a marriage partner. Of course, Poor women can marry rich men, but poor men do not have such good chances of marrying rich women. After all, the man must provide the home in which the woman is to live. This is a law of nature as well as the common sense of most societies. Once again, the Asian people are much better off than the Westerners in this area of life. And once again, it is not a matter of being Asian, it is only a matter of truly looking at the realities of life and in making thoughtful and wise decisions upon which to base your actions. It is really cruel what the Western people do to their children in the areas of matrimony. Of course, true love and love at first sight can happen in life, but it is really quite rare. It seems pathetic to me to see the Western women spending so much time and money on clothes and hairstyles and makeup in their attempts to attract a mate. And using Thoreau's phrase, they seem so much to be living lives of quiet desperation as their left arms flag nimbly about in the air as they walk. It's almost as if, lacking the added weight of a wedding ring, their left arms and hands find an additional lightness. Likewise, all of the time and money spent by the young men on cars and fancy clothes and the entertaining of young women on dinner dates and various outings is really quite enormous. These are all vanities that do little for mutual understanding between a man and a woman. And they are an expense which costs the American people huge amounts but which costs the Oriental people very little. Once again, the Oriental people grow richer through their wisdom and frugality while the Westerners, especially Americans, grow poor as a result of extravagance and stupidity. To explain the difference between the two cultures is really quite easy. While the Western people allow their children to pass through the youthful torments of lust and passion like stray dogs and cats, the Oriental people guide their children through these difficult times as loving human beings should guide their children, through the method known as arranged marriages. I am not saying that arranged marriages are always, in every case, such a good thing, but they certainly have a much lower divorce rate than anything that the West has to offer its youngsters. And arranged marriages are certainly not something that is Oriental. Read the following passage from a 17th-century European play, The Miser by Molière, and see that whatever Asia invented regarding arranged marriages is nothing at all new to the West. Client: Yes, I'm in love, and let me say before we go any further that I am fully aware that I am dependent on my father, that as a son I must submit to his wishes, that we should never give a promise of marriage without the consent of those who brought us into the world, that heaven made them the arbiters of our choice, that it is our duty never to bestow our affections except as they may decide, that, not being blinded by passion, they are less likely to be deceived and better able to see what is good for us than we are ourselves, then it behoves us to trust to the light of their prudence rather than to our own blind desires, and that youthful impetuosity leads, as often as not, to disaster. I mention all this, my dear sister, to save you the trouble of saying it. The fact is that I am too much in love to listen to anything you have to say, and I, therefore, ask you to spare your remonstrances. Elise: And you have actually given her your promise? Client: No, but I am determined to do so, and I ask you, once again, not to try to dissuade me. So you see, none of these arranged marriages or even marriages of convenience are new to the West, because men and women for countless ages have tried to understand not just the debt that we all owe to our parents but also the relationship between parent and child. As Clint so aptly observes, parents are in a better position than the children to judge a qualified marriage partner. Not being blinded by passion, they are less likely to be deceived and better able to see what is good for us than we are ourselves. Admittedly, the arranged marriages of Asia are not the totally unselfish desire of the parents to make a happy match for their children, because there is also involved the wise idea of choosing someone who will also be willing to be of benefit to the parents when they become old and dependent. You see, China, as well as every other country where the people are not afraid to look at life as well as to look at death, was long ago enlightened as to how much a parent should trust their own children versus how much they should trust the state to aid them in their twilight years. In the West, the parents send the children off into the sunset over the horizon and then grow old, poor, feeble and alone in a convalescent hospital while their children enjoy their own lives of toil and mortgage payments. This is really a waste of both of their lives. It is a vicious cycle that gets passed along to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren forever. 2. Allow children the freedom to make the lust and passion-induced mistakes of choosing a marriage partner without parental aid, is to invite chaos into the family. In Asia, it is well understood that when the children grow up and can make a living, it is their duty and responsibility to give help to their old parents. Both the old people and the young people in America are fools not to understand this. While the Americans today spend money to have their parents stored away in a convalescent hospital or retirement home, they are becoming poorer and poorer. So, they should not make grudging comments about Oriental people who are becoming richer merely by following the ancient, Oriental ways of common sense, Human love and frugality. 80% of the residents of nursing homes don't get any visitors, ever. 15. And these old people live out their lives watching the ghosts and game shows on the Electric Jew, and living among others their own age who are strangers to them. These are some very lonely people, these aged Americans. They are hungry for talk and will avidly converse with anyone who is willing to take the time. They are so glad to talk with anyone and to shake your hand with a firm grip that says, "Please stay longer. Don't go. But if you must go, thank you for talking with me. Please visit again." Their only joys that remain are found on the dinner plate, and this is only a joy to their declining taste buds. It is really a barbaric society that fosters such a state of affairs. And it is a society that is doomed to perish unless a change of heart and an acceptance of life is made by the American people. It is a land of dogs, fools and grinning bankers to treat their old people with such callousness. And yet, it is a choice that these old people made in their youths. They chose to trust in Jewish Federal Reserve notes rather than to trust in their own family and children. They believed that the government would support them on Social Security rather than to have as a comfort and support their own children for whom they worked away their lives. Within a year, the average American old person who enters a convalescent hospital or retirement home is reduced to the economic level of a pauper. Their trust in money, whether as stocks and bonds, savings, pensions, and Social Security, is a misplaced trust. As inflation rises, the power of their money diminishes. They trusted in money, one of the most unstable of foundations, while they allowed their children to follow this same path and to abandon them. And, under this modern system, these same children will be abandoned in their turn by their own children. Thus, the American dream becomes a nightmare. And the Americans and other Westerners become not only poorer and poorer materially, but they become low in spirit and demoralized as they perceive the uselessness of this kind of a life. On the other hand, the Oriental people know from vast centuries of trial and error that the best way to live life is together with friends and relatives. After all, man is not a lone animal like a cat but is more of a social being like a monkey or an ant. We do better when we work together than when we work alone. This is only natural and human. But it is certainly unnatural and non-human for the people of the West to strive for their own selfish little domain while excluding even their own relatives. Such thinking leads to both economic and personal ruin. When an Oriental person reaches a certain age, it is time to retire and live off of the fruits of the children's labor. And the young people understand and respect this because someday their own turn will come. It is a loss of money for old people to pay the retirement homes for a place to live and be cared for. And yet, it is a loss that has fraudulently become a part of the American system. Don't blame the Asian for being richer merely by being wiser and more frugal and sane. When the Oriental old people need a place to live, they don't have to go anywhere else than where they are already, with their family. With their family, they are surrounded by loving relatives and not by paid attendants and strangers. If they are not too decrepit, they can always enjoy the grandchildren and lend a hand by saving their family the expense of babysitters and daycare. Thus, the Oriental, extended family grows even wealthier without effort while the Western, nuclear family grows poorer even while working double shifts for both parents. As for the children, they can find a wealth of stories and wise advice with their old parents and grandparents. And where else can wisdom be found but in the old people? In matters of life or matters of finance, it is to the old people that the young people of Asia turn for advice. This is a very natural and a very ancient way and is found in every country in the world where wisdom reigns above foolishness. And it is one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth because the wisdom of age is applied to the various ideas and money-making schemes that youths invent. While the average Western youngster, out alone in the dog-eat-dog world of business, might find that he takes 3 steps forward and 2 steps back from his mistakes and folly in his progress through life, such is not the case with the Asian lads and lasses. While working at the very same jobs, the Asian can successfully outperform the Westerner merely because the Asian asks his elders for good advice and the tricks of the trade while the arrogant Western youth plows ahead regardless of advice. Westerners can never compete successfully with Asians without discovering wisdom. And wisdom is not something that is the sole property of any one people but it is found in all cultures around the world. Wisdom is not the sole possession of the elderly, either, nor is it found in any of the schools or universities where only knowledge is taught. Wisdom is a combination of knowledge and life's experience. This is why the oldsters usually have more of it than do youths. A young man can be very smart but still make foolish mistakes because, lacking experience of life, he cannot tell how to apply his wonderful knowledge in a faultless way. And this is where the youths of the West fall behind the youths of the East simply because the Asian youth is quick to ask for and glad to receive advice from his elders regarding business, finance, work or personal habits while the youths of the West are negligent in asking for and resentful of receiving the same advice from their elders. This is very stupid of them. But they learn to be arrogant and stupid from watching Hollywood's trash served up on the electric Jew. Even Chinese children are becoming unruly and lacking in filial piety as they are brainwashed by this monstrosity of Jewish television and Hollywood pornography. And yet, the Asians become richer because two heads are better than one, while the Westerners become poorer since no man is an island, but they insist on being an island anyway. The cult of the rugged individual is designed to make money for the bankers and industrialists, but it leads to poverty for everyone else. The cult of the rugged individualist leads to poverty for everyone else because united we stand, divided we fall. The bankers and industrialists profit thereby because divide and conquer as applied to finance, provides more individual, Western consumers than are found in the Asian, group-oriented methods. It is true, as the Western marrying girls say to their boyfriends, that two can live cheaper than one. And applied to the Asian versus Occidental methods, 30 in a family group can live cheaper than 10 individual Americans living alone. So, move in with your relatives, sleep on the floor if you must, and grow richer together rather than grow poor all by yourselves. 7. The seventh essential of life is children. They are an essential because without children, a man or woman becomes the slave of the state and dependent upon the cruel mercies of fate and old age. Only the religious saints, monks and nuns can benefit from not having children. Not only are children a joy in one's married life, but they become a comfort in one's old age. That is, children are all of these things if you know and follow the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. And to follow these hidden secrets, one must raise one's own children with truth and not with falsehood. In the West, especially in the United States, children are given lies that are sworn to be the truth, and they are still expected to understand the difference between truth and lies. It might seem too simple to mention, but I will mention it anyway. To tell innocent, trusting children lies about Santa Claus and flying reindeer, is one mistake. To tell them about Easter rabbits and deceive them with hidden eggs, is two mistakes. To tell them of tooth fairies, and then to fool them by hiding money under their pillow at night is 3 mistakes. To tell them about witches and vampires on Halloween is 4 mistakes. What can be said about an entire society that puts enormous lies and resources every year into deceiving little children? Can such a society raise trusting children who believe what their elders tell them? Certainly not. After lying with earnest persuasion about flying reindeer and magic, egg-laying bunnies, what happens when you tell these same wide-eyed and astonished children about God and Jesus and wisdom and virtue? To expect these children to believe you, is sheer lunacy. So, how can such an idiot society not have problems with their youths taking drugs and being delinquents? Listen, kid, there really is a Santa Claus, and I want you to believe me when I say that taking drugs and stealing cars is bad for you. To raise children on lies which the parents and society swears to be the truth, is only inviting sullen resentment when you tell them the truth which they will assume to be just another lie. I found this legend written on the bottom of a teenager's skateboard in Los Gatos, California in the late 1970s, "The truth is, all you know are the lies." Doesn't this say something about the outlook of American youth? For the sake of making a holiday dollar, American society destroys itself by destroying the trust of its youth. In fact, holiday means holy day. And history is filled with traces of destroyed societies that forsook truth for the sake of lucre. The bankers and merchants cannot be expected to make any changes since they are the ones who profit from such lies, so it is up to the American people to tear down and rid themselves of falsehood disguised as truth. Only then, will they be free as well as prosperous. But how do these lies gain such a foothold in American society? Simply through a lack of vigilance. Asians, too, have various myths and fairy stories, but it is not like in the West where the only goal is sales receipts and Jewish profits. Asian myths and stories are told as a means of instilling good thoughts in the listener. To teach righteousness, truth, respect, virtue, holiness, valor, and filial piety, are all worthy goals of these stories and legends. At one time, these same things were taught in the American schools, too, such as with the famous McGuffey readers. But with the godless lawyers and judges abusing the true and original meaning of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it is almost illegal to pray. In fact, it is illegal to prey on government property or anywhere else that government money is used to buy the people as well as to buy things for the people. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution was written for and addressed to the God-fearing, religious people of the United States in the 18th century. It states most clearly that government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. It was written in this way to gain the necessary signatures of the representatives of the people. To the God-fearing people of 1776, the word establishment was, and still is, a noun. It means any establishment or place of religion, whether a church or an assembly hall or any religious body. Thus, the government has no right to make any law that relates to religion in any way whatsoever. This is what the original intent and understanding of this word and phrase was in 1776. But once the Jewish and communist lawyers of the ACLU started to work with their two-faced double talk, the meaning was immediately twisted. You see, the big boys in government, all governments, the bankers, lawyers, industrialists, judges, doctors, they all make their money partly through unsavory ways. They deal with deceit, graft, treachery, payoffs, sexual favors, kickbacks, power, money and even murder every day of their lives. It is not to their benefit for the people to judge their actions under religious and moral law because they are all, with but few exceptions, guilty of high treason to their people and to morality and to God. And yet, under the civil laws which they, themselves, write, they appear as innocent and clean as freshly fallen snow. And so, once the Constitution was signed with the meaning of the First Amendment being taken at face value by the signers and by the people, these scoundrels no longer wanted this particular article to be in force. So, through the double-talking lawyers and corrupt judges, they made a false and deceitful assumption. They assumed that the original writers and signers of the Constitution added the words "an establishment of religion" in the sense that establishment was a verb and not a noun. Thus, through this kind of forked-tongued sleight of hand, they claimed essentially that government by influence had power over religion and over religious institutions as well as over when and where people are allowed to talk about religion or to pray, and that the First Amendment was really only there to prevent government from establishing a religion of its own. In fact, the U.S. government has established its own religion by influence and by default. By assuming that it has the power to prevent religious expression on the grounds that government money is somehow involved in whatever the event, the U.S. government breaks both the intent and the will behind the First Amendment. By preventing the free expression of religion or religious views anywhere in America whether on government property or not, is a clear violation of both the intent of the writers and the will of the signers of the Constitution. And it is an act of treachery acted upon the American people. By making any law whatsoever regarding religion, either for or against, the U.S. government has overstepped its lawful bounds. The lawyer-created phrase "the separation of church and state" has no constitutional foundation whatsoever. The original founders of the United States certainly did not separate their daily life from their prayers to God. To claim that a child cannot preach Christianity on school grounds simply because the government gives money to the school to operate, is sheer sleight of hand. The false reasoning is, that since this money is provided by the government, it would break the First Amendment because the government would be, using the verb, establishing a religion by allowing preaching to occur on a government-financed school ground. Only a lying lawyer could think up such falseness. This infringes not only an American's right to freedom of religion anywhere in the land and freedom of speech anywhere in the land, but it is, in fact, an establishment of religion by the government, and that religion's name is anti-religion. And why would a government want to destroy religious freedom? Because as Jewish communism teaches, people are more easily controlled if they behave like animals or if they are taught to behave like animals. Animals can be broken to the whip and starved into submission. But humans with religious knowledge and belief can undergo any hardship and still persevere to victory. Neither the Jewish commissars nor the Jewish bankers want this. And so, to further their one-world government United Nations conspiracy, they attack religion whenever they can. Especially, is Christianity a target since Jesus was the only religious leader in history to actually tell the truth about the Jews. And they hate him for it to this day. This is why any Catholic priests or Protestant ministers who commit personal errors are splashed across the front page headlines of every Jew-owned newspaper and TV station for weeks at a time. The Jews love to make asses out of Christians while hiding the perversions of their own rabbis behind the ads on the back pages. There is no level playing field when the Antichrists own the media. I am concerned about this because of what I have seen in the communist countries. Government has no authority and no right to say anything one way or the other about religion. It is something beyond their comprehension. And so, when I see the same things happening in America that I have seen happen in the communist Asian countries, I don't like it one bit. If the federal government will not obey the will of heaven, earth and the people, then rebellion is the only alternative for the people. And this is why the right to keep and bear arms was one of the Bill of Rights. This right was not guaranteed merely for fighting off Indians and thugs, but to defend yourself from oppressive government. Knowing the power of temptation in the heart of man, the Founding Fathers did not trust any government, not even the one they, themselves, created. And this is why the big money boys, the bankers, lawyers, doctors, industrialists are trying to take away the right to keep and bear arms, because they know that their days are numbered and they want to stave off the wrath of the people for as long as possible. This is one of the first signs of an authoritarian and dictatorial government, when they take the weapons of self-defense away from the people. The first thing the Mongols did when they invaded China centuries ago, was to allow only one meat cleaver for every 10 families. This is what the shoguns of Japan did once they had achieved ultimate power, was to have a sword hunt and take away the swords from everyone who was not one of their samurai goons. The modern, Japanese shadow shoguns of today, known as the ruling elite, also have strict gun control laws because they fear the people's vengeance. The communists, the Japanese, the United Nations and now the American government seem to all have similar ideas along these lines. It is an interesting fact that the country of Switzerland requires by law that every able-bodied man in the country keep in his own house a fully automatic machine gun in good repair. And yet, Switzerland has the lowest murder rate in Europe. Guns do not kill people, people kill people. To raise up a country's youths who have been deprived of the Word of God and the teachings of morality through the brainwashing of public education and the perverse lies of the Jewish media, is to invite murders, rapes, killing, looting and other sad events into society. All of this is the fault of the government because it has taken the guaranteed rights away from the people. It has taken away religious and moral law and replaced them with civil law. Thus, it has established a government religion of anti-religion. By its own making, the U.S. government has raised up cynical and rebellious youths who grow up only to fill the overcrowded government prisons. The people of Europe are in the same situation because they have also trusted their politicians. And the politicians have betrayed them to the twin Jewish swindles of communism and banking. And so it is, that the United States of America, the land of the free, has, according to Amnesty International, a higher percentage of its people in prison than any other country in the world including the communist as well as the dictatorial states. I find this exceedingly strange, but with the Jewish bankers, Jewish lawyers and the traitorous politicians defying both common sense and moral law, it is understandable. The children in America are very much excluded from adult life. They are placed in a little box from which they are not allowed to escape. Instead of being appreciated as continually maturing little humans growing to adulthood, they are segmented and departmentalized in inhuman ways. Again, the mercantile interests and lawyers are very much to blame here. Children are categorized into infants, children, preteens, teenagers and adults. Later, this same ridiculous system is applied to young adults, middle-aged and senior citizens. I say that this is a phony and destructive Jewish method of valuing people because it does not take into consideration human biological truth but instead substitutes a false category where no category naturally exists. Every civilization the world has ever known, has realized that once a child reaches the age of puberty at around 12 or 13 years of age, he or she is no longer a child but is an adult. They are young adults, true, but adults nevertheless. And all of these world cultures have usually had some sort of ceremony or religious rite to recognize and to celebrate the youth changing into an adult. That is, most civilizations do this except in the West. In the West, it was found by the bankers and deduced by the lawyers that young adults, living as lone Americans without family backing, didn't have the ability to repay loans or fully enter into business dealings successfully. So, man-made laws were passed that transgressed all biological and natural laws. It was decreed by the high and mighty judges and lawyers that a man was not a man nor was a woman until the age of 18 or, in some cases, 21 years of age. Thus began in the West the first stages of demeaning youths and retarding the growth of adults. And by retarding their adult capabilities, the Jew commies have been able to retard the power and wealth of the entire nation. Yes, it is a conspiracy. Today, in America are found big, strapping 180 and 200-pound 15-year-olds who beat up old ladies and steal cars or murder people just for something to do. Because they have been raised in a society that prohibits the teaching of morality, wisdom or religion in the schools and which decrees that such a bully of a boy is not a man, these young adults think as children and are treated as children in the courts. 18 and 20-year-old liquor store burglars and strong-arm robbers are looked upon as mere children who really don't understand the seriousness of their crime. And yet, the real criminals are the lawyers, politicians and judges who believe that their opinion is even greater than God's, heaven's or nature's law combined. The real criminal is the society, itself, that raises up youths ignorant of moral law. But lawyers don't make money from the virtuous. They make money from the crooked and corrupt. So, correcting this situation cannot be done within the legal system. Now, this interaction among friends and family groups is visible in a study that showed that neighborhood dollars turned over 6 times in San Francisco's Chinatown, but in predominantly black East Oakland the dollars turned over only once before they left the community. This is because Chinese people do business among themselves while the blacks do business with the Jewish slumlords and the various foreigners such as East Indian speculators, Arabs and Koreans who take their profits out of the black neighborhoods and put those profits in their pockets. African American people might ask themselves where this money disappears. Drugs? Some of it. The banker's mortgage payments? Some of it. Or is it not wise to understand the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth? For example, when a people owns their own businesses, works a 6 or 7 day work week, hires their own relatives, who often work for free, does business with their own neighbors and shares the profits with their friends and family, then the money is bound to circulate and not vanish. Only when selfish individuals try to make their own individual profits does the flow of finance speed into individual pockets. Money is like water. It grows as it flows. And yet, working together for mutual benefit is only a hidden secret because it is so obvious. There are no worthless members of a natural, human family. Even the poorest and least member of a family has something to offer to the others. This lesson was appreciated by the American Indians. When a little boy with his toy bow and arrow came back to camp with a little mouse that he had shot, everyone celebrated. It was an occasion to hold a feast and congratulate that little boy. Along with the rest of the food, that mouse was skinned and cooked and eaten with fanfare and gladness because everyone knew that it was only a little mouse today, but when the boy turned into a man, it would be a big buffalo tomorrow. Even the labor of children adds to family wealth. But in America, the children are given 3 months of vacation in the summer while their parents work. This is a holdover of pioneer farming and harvest timing and not conducive to educated young people in a modern society. But as a means of slowing down American productivity so that the Third World can overtake the United States, it is a method well devised by the Jewish communists who are undermining this country. Lazy youths lead to family poverty and to rich industrialists who will sell the United States to foreigners if only the young people of America can be made illiterate and lazy enough. During the school year, Chinese youths study at public school but also go to Chinese school for several hours per week. The extra study in Chinese language, kung fu, meditational breathing, qigong, and calligraphy makes them smarter while the America children are following the protocols of the elders of Zion and wasting their energies playing sports instead of improving their minds. And so, a family is made poorer when the youths are made to think that they are only little kids who only get but never give. They are owed 3 months vacation from their studies because they are kids who don't have to work until they grow up. And they are brainwashed into believing that school and learning is so much hard work that they need a 3 months vacation from it just to recuperate. Thus, America produces, in its federally financed schools, idiots instead of intelligent children. And the industrialists, who write the laws, grow richer because of this built-in system of illiterates who become the low-paid wage slaves of the future. But they are not wage slaves who actually have a dependable job because, ever alert for cheaper labor, the American industrialists demand unrestricted immigration of cheap foreign labor to supplant the more expensive idiots that they have raised up in the public schools. No Asian country would import labor while throwing out of work its citizens because we know that a country's true wealth is measured, first and foremost, in the strength and harmony of its people, not merely in the wealth of its Jewish bankers and traitorous industrialists. Very few children raised up in these ways grow up to appreciate the true pleasures of learning. In their ongoing assault upon America, the Jewish communists who control the media, insist that the children can't learn because of poor schools or bad teachers or 1,000 other excuses designed to hide the actual facts that, 1. No matter how hard you try, you can't teach someone who doesn't want to learn, and 2. No matter how hard you try, you cannot prevent a child from learning something that he wants to learn. In other words, the children are being deceived into thinking that for them to learn, it is up to the schools and the teachers to teach them. But in fact, it is up to the student to learn, no matter how good or bad the schools and teachers are. It is up to the student to learn, it is not up to the teacher to teach. When this hidden secret is not known, then the students are forever failing because they have been led to rely upon a false theory of education. But because of the international money lenders who control the school systems, these children are meant to fail. When they fail as students, they will not achieve a high level as adults, and if they cannot achieve a high level as adults, then the international money lenders will be able to make even more profits by keeping wages down and importing labor from the third world nations where the children are actually given an education. That black people, as well as whites, misunderstand the important role of children in contributing to the family wealth can be seen in the opening words of this essay. It used to be that you hated Mexicans. Now blacks hate the Asians because, like the Mexicans, Asians got to step over us on their climb upward. Yet, one of the methods used by the Mexicans for stepping over the blacks is simple: remain together as a family and give all money earned by all members to the father. Then, the father, with his increased buying power and prestige, can buy things for the family. But one must raise one's children to honor thy father and thy mother for this system to work. Another way that the Mexicans got to step over us is because close family ties and brotherly love prompts the Mexican to pass along his job to his friend or relative when he leaves. Thus, The extended family method of Asia is used by the Catholic Mexican as second nature. By passing along the job, the Mexicans as an ethnic group begin to have and to keep jobs and to dominate the job market, while the black people and the white people who prefer the every man for himself philosophy find that they can't get their old jobs back because the Mexicans have them but don't let them out of Mexican racial control. La Raza is a rallying cry for Mexicans. La Raza means the Mexican race. Racism is a powerful social and political tool that has been given to people of color by the Jews for gaining economic and political power over white people. In fact, the very phrase, people of color, was invented by the Jew commies because this phrase polarizes all non-white people on earth against the white man. But it is forbidden by the Jews that any white people use racism in their own survival strategies because the Jews have decided that the white people are to be dispossessed of their country and obliterated from the earth. America and Europe are being taken away from the whites by the Jews and sold to and inhabited by the people of the Third World. By using racism, the Jewish communists rally their troops. They meld together the Third World peoples with racism. And they divide the Euro-American people by disallowing their cohesiveness with racial brotherhood. It is a form of genocide against white people. It is strange that the one people in the world who claim to have such an aversion to genocide are the world's foremost practitioners of genocide. When the Jewish Bolsheviks took over Russia in 1917, they immediately murdered 40,000 Christian priests and 4 million Russians. Then under Stalin, the Jews murdered another 40 million. And since that time, Jewish communism is directly responsible for the murder of 100 million people worldwide. And why do they scream so loud about the alleged 6 million Jews under Hitler? Because they want everyone to be so sick and tired of hearing about genocide that they don't want anyone to notice the 100 million that they, themselves, murdered. And they certainly don't want anyone to notice that the Jewish abortion mills murder millions of white and black children every year while the Jewish bankers make it impossible for white farmers and families to survive. Communism is Jewish. Banking is Jewish. Western medicine is Jewish. And genocide is Jewish. Jesus called them hypocrites, but I call them ordinary, everyday Jews. At first it seemed odd to me that a country that can orbit Mars and explore Jupiter can't protect its own borders from illegal immigration. It is all a matter of national will. But the international Jewish financiers don't will it, and since these buy and blackmail the American politicians, the borders are open to any illegal alien or enemy who wishes to enter. And so, Americans would do well to take better care of their children because these children will someday be guardians of the state. Unlike the American parents who place their children with babysitters while they go out, who exclude them from adult gatherings and are careful not to fight in front of the children, Oriental people usually treat their children as normal human youngsters. By treating children as normal human beings, Oriental children grow up to be normal. But by treating children as special little, individual groups like babies, kids, teenagers and adolescents, Western children grow up with a retarded sense of wholeness or a feeling of incompleteness. A good example of this problem and its solution can be seen in the Sidney Poitier film, To Sir, With Love. Western children never feel complete as people because the government has decreed that they are children even though they are biologically adults. They are always striving to grow up. They fall victim to the mercantile seductions of buying things that the advertising implies will make them into adults: liquor, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, flashy automobiles, fancy clothes and endless varieties of skin and hair cosmetics. All Jewish monopolies. What a coincidence. You can see the difference in the two mental attitudes expressed by the average Western and Eastern child. The Western teenager is usually either boisterous and rowdy, unable to calm his racing ego, or he is easily frightened and uncertain about his role in life. Such a child is an easy target of the Jewish pornography industry of Hollywood. But the Oriental child is, in general, cool, calm and collected. The difference is mainly in the foods that they eat, the breathing techniques that they use, and the methods with which these children are raised. Americans are content to allow their children to become like the dysfunctional idiots, the perverts, the criminals, the dope fiends, the soap opera divas and the morons who play sports, since these are held up by the Jewish media monopoly as the very pinnacle of desirability. But Asians prefer to raise their own children to be normal human beings rather than victims of the media moguls. Oriental parents do not exclude their children from their life like the Western parents do. It is not at all uncommon to see an Oriental business executive taking to an important meeting his little son. And the working mother is often accompanied by her children at work, where they sometimes even lend a hand in the labors. In general, the Oriental people take their children along with them rather than leave them at home alone or with a babysitter. Thus, these children gain the valuable experiences of life from observing both parents and strangers that allow them to be successful in the adult world. Certainly, they develop a more wholesome and mature attitude than those poor, deceived and manipulated children that are raised in the West. Meanwhile, Westerners abandon their children with babysitters who are strangers or leave them to their own devices. The result is that these children not only are deficient in their knowledge of real life, but they go into adulthood with false expectations as to what this adult life is really like. Western children are trained to be the sole captain of their fate, while Oriental children are trained to face the world knowing that they have the backing of their family. Thus, the Oriental has both the psychological and the monetary advantage over his Western brother. While the Western young adult must build his own business and professional network of people with whom to work and make a living, the Oriental young adult already has in place a vast network of relatives who will help him with money and advice in his business ventures. And thus, while the Westerners fall behind, the Orientals thrive merely by following the ancient course of human companionship and common sense. For you to be able to take advantage of these hidden secrets of Oriental wealth, you must be willing to forgive and forget. That is, you must be willing to talk with your relatives and to iron out any bad feelings that you may share. If your goal is a better, wealthier, more trouble-free life, then you must be able to understand that one's family is more than merely two parents and their children. A family includes all of your relations, uncles, cousins, aunts, grandparents, everybody. Once this is understood, then there is no limit to what all of you can accomplish together. But, you may complain, in modern times there just isn't time to get everybody together long enough to accomplish anything. If you think about it, this is where you will discover yet another hidden secret of Oriental wealth. In America, the holidays are devised strictly for the sake of Jewish merchants and industrial sales. Simply because the United States of America is officially an anti-religion country, most people really don't know that Jesus was born in the early summer and certainly not in cold December, or that the celebration of Easter is not commemorating Jesus arising on the third day but is really the Druidic celebration of the rebirth of Easter, the pagan goddess of spring. Even the Western Sabbath has been changed for political reasons from Saturday to Sunday. This list could go on, but suffice it to say that Americans blindly celebrate holidays that have no real meaning. Their celebration of New Year's Day has nothing much that can be said about a new year, since there are no special astronomical reasons for having the new year begin on January 1st. Primarily, the United States is a pagan country with a patina of Christianity covering up the dark spots. No one seems to care much for truth. Even the clocks are set with daylight savings time, a holdover from wartime methods, merely as an industrial convenience. Thus, no one is even in time with something as simple as sunrise. It is no wonder that Americans have a scattered and slipshod approach to one another, since they are out of time with the universe itself. This is not the case with the Oriental people, especially the Chinese. Not all of us get up before dawn to practice Tai Chi Chuan and martial arts or deep breathing exercises, but we all celebrate Chinese New Year in a way that the West would do well to copy. In the first place, the Chinese New Year is in time with the seasons. When the moon reaches its appointed place in the sky, Chinese New Year begins. Why should it matter whether or not the New Year begins at the same time every year? With Westerners, New Year begins precisely at 12 midnight, January 1st, regardless of whether or not the moon is wane or full. Western people are not in harmony with the cosmos when they do this. They believe that their timing is superior to celestial timing. But no man can grasp the wind nor throw back the sea, neither can one change the course of the planets, moon and stars. But this is only an observation. This is not one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. The real secret here is found in the duration of time that is devoted to this Chinese New Year holiday. Depending on which Asian culture you look at, Chinese New Year lasts from 10 to 15 days. By having one big holiday once a year, there is more time to make money during the remainder of the year. This is the time of year to pay off debts, get the house in order and begin receiving guests and paying visits to relatives. This 10 to 15 day holiday is plenty of time to iron out family feuds and talk out differences, to plan for the coming year and to offer aid to those with little while receiving benevolent gifts from those with much. In these 10 or 15 days, much can be accomplished. Businesses can be built and put into operation among cooperative relatives. And intelligence can be shared. And Chinese New Year makes Orientals richer while Christmas makes Westerners poorer. And why? Simply because during Chinese New Year we show appreciation to others by giving red envelopes of money, while Westerners spend their money buying lavish gifts to give away. Such a foolish system makes the gift giver poorer yet doesn't make the receiver any richer. Only the Jewish bankers and merchants benefit at Christmas time. So, if the Asian is richer than the average Westerner, you might think about a change in your gift giving. Money makes a wonderful gift. Just be sure to first put it in a red envelope before you give it. After all, it's a nice gift. It isn't dirty money. So, wrap it up first in a red envelope. Red is the symbol for heaven. Compare this to the way Westerners celebrate their New Year, if you can really call it a celebration. The only goal is to have a party, perhaps get drunk at midnight, sleep late the next day and maybe go back to work on the third or fourth day of the new year. Thus, nothing has time to happen. The same is true for Christmas, the biggest holiday in the United States. There is a whole month and a half building up to it with the buying of gifts and the anticipation. But it is really a short-lived holiday. It lasts a single day and it's over. Thanksgiving, Halloween, you name it, all of the American holidays really are lacking in substance, not to mention truthfulness and reason for being. They have no depth or quality. And because of their random scattering throughout the year, they cause loss of both time and money at work depending upon how they are connected with weekends. You may celebrate Chinese New Year if you want to, but what I am saying is that Americans do not have any control over their holidays. These holidays have been manipulated by politicians, lawyers, and special interest groups. A special U.S. lobby representing Jewish manufacturers of barbecue and sports equipment even had daylight savings time extended so that they could have better summer sales. What I am suggesting is, if you want to learn the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth, you should, with your family, make it a yearly obligation to celebrate being together for at least 10 days every year. This is real wealth, if you have a large family and you love one another. Thus, with only a little common sense, anyone can be wealthy if they have the courage to face the truths of life. And one of the truths of life is early to bed, early to rise, makes a person healthy, wealthy and wise. For Westerners to stay up late watching the electronic Jew and thus getting their minds filled full of trash, and then getting up late and missing the sunrise, is to trade dross for gold. Especially, is it nice to practice Tai Chi Chuan in the beauty of the early morning. Besides overcoming illness and old age, Tai Chi Chuan practice is like taking a wonderful, 20-minute vacation to paradise. The kingdom is within thee. Chapter 2 Games and Strategy. One of the most jealously guarded of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth has been the martial secrets of warfare and strategy. While I can say that the Chinese consider such applications as ungentlemanly, the Japanese use these methods on friend and enemy alike in all aspects of their dealings with other cultures. The Japanese are especially expert at undermining the United States since the people and leaders of the United States are peaceable players of children's games and are not of a military mind. Thus, American people are naive children when it comes to deception and trickery on both the battlefield and in the business world. From the most primitive cultures to the most advanced, much can be learned about the mental attitude of any people on Earth by looking at the games that they play in their leisure pastimes. In the West, children's games have been elevated into the adult world as a means of mass marketing. Football, baseball, basketball, golf, tennis, and many other sports and games take up the leisure time of the average American either as a participant or more commonly as a spectator. All of this is very nice if you are a child learning to coordinate your limbs. But for adults to put so much of their lives into trivial sports and games, is really pathetic. But much worse, to encourage the youths to spend their time playing games rather than studying books, is an ignorant kind of racial and national suicide. The sports and games of the Oriental consist of more interesting and valuable pastimes. Karate, Aikido Jiu-Jitsu, various Kung Fu styles, Arnis and Kali and Eskrima, Pencak Silat and Tai Chi Chuan are a few of the martial arts that do quite nicely as sport, as entertainment and as self-defense. Martial arts to be wary of spending too much time in, are Judo and Aikido. Although basically good exercise, the Japanese, ever ready to hide their true knowledge and intentions from the West, have watered down these arts so that Westerners cannot learn the more deadly aspects of them such as Jiu-Jitsu and Aikijutsu. The Chinese martial arts, except for the communist propaganda system known as Wushu, are all excellent for health exercise as well as self-defense. Americans would do well to spend more time learning how to defeat heart disease and cancer through Chinese Tai Chi Chuan and Qi Kung than learning how to defeat the opposing baseball team in points. A little old lady who practices Tai Chi Chuan will never become decrepit or suffer from arthritis or heart ailments and is more than a match for the biggest mugger. And martial arts are a way of enlightenment, if you study Oriental philosophy and breathing techniques, too. The martial arts of Asia, and especially China, are a complete health exercise system, breathing and meditation system, method of strategy and a self-defense system. The West has nothing comparable. Unfortunately, because of the media misuse of martial arts in flashy fight scenes alone, most Americans only see the violent side of these arts and completely miss the health benefits in their use in building moral character and strategic planning ability in the practitioners. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was asked, "Do you think martial arts training is good for young kids?" He replied, "I think it's absolutely essential. I have my kids do martial arts because it's the only thing that I've found that really brings everything into focus." That this basketball world champion would say such a thing shows that there is something more to the Oriental martial arts than can be found in Western athletics. One of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth consists of martial arts as health exercise, confidence building, learning strategy and tactics, as well as self-defense. A young person trained in martial arts doesn't have to prove anything to anyone and rarely gets into the kinds of trouble that untrained youths fall into. And an old person who practices Tai Chi Chuan will live a long, healthy life without fear of being mugged by the doctors or imprisoned in a retirement home. The game-playing Americans have a difficult time understanding the chess-playing Soviets who, after 70 years of murderous intrigue against the Western democracies, are now obtaining free aid and low-interest loans at American taxpayer expense. But Americans have an even more difficult time understanding how the chess-playing Asians outwit them so often in business. The chess of Asia is also a war game, but it is very different from the chess that is known in the West. Any Western chess player can explain to any Western businessman the advantages and the applications in business of chess strategy. However, very few Western chess players are adept at the strategy and tactics of Oriental chess since they egotistically and ignorantly think that only Western chess has any merit. Indeed, Western chess players are arrogant in their knowledge of Western chess while simultaneously being intellectual cowards. They have devoted so much time and effort in mastering Western chess that they really are afraid to get involved with the chess of Asia. And so, they miss both a refreshing intellectual pleasure as well as a full appreciation of how chess has changed and varied from the original East Indian game of chaturanga. The Chinese game of Wei Qi, or as it is known by its Japanese name of Go, is one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth which has been overlooked by Westerners who merely shrug off the game as being of the level known as mere Japanese checkers. In fact, the game of Go is more difficult than is Western chess, although the rules are as simple as checkers. Does this sound like a game of checkers where the object is to capture real estate, make a profit and cut and kill the opponent? This is precisely the terminology that is used in this game. To give an example of how important Go strategy was to Japan, it is beneficial to know that the game was forbidden to be taught to anyone not of the ruling elite. This law was in effect for several hundred years. Today, every Japanese corporate executive is expected to be expert at the game of Go, or his prospects for promotion are very dim. Every Oriental businessman knows how to surround his opponent on the Go board like grid of a street map and to gain the advantage in logistics, and how to connect his own lines of supply and how to cut his business opponents. For example, whether this represents a Go board or the intersection of streets on a city map, notice what happens when the black pieces at the lower edge of the board are surrounded and cut off by the white pieces. They either die from lack of business or they leave the neighborhood. Such subtle strategies are one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. But it isn't like the black man in the opening paragraph believes that they don't really bother anyone. They just crowd you out. The method is more like occupying the unused, strategic spaces a little bit at a time until, with patience, the other ethnic individuals and groups just feel like they want to move elsewhere. But it usually only works against people who don't know how to play Go. The Japanese have been using this game of Go strategy on the United States continuously since Commodore Perry landed in Japan in 1853. At this time, they are engulfing America, Peru, Brazil and Canada using these methods gained from a knowledge of the game of Go. They are purposely destroying the American industrial structure by applying these Go techniques to the field of business. I am glad that Go was invented in China, but sad that the Japanese, like almost everything else their culture possesses, have stolen this game for their own purposes. Using Go game strategy, it is easy to compare the styles of American and Japanese. The main difference between the Western businessman and the Japanese businessman is the difference between a lust for money and a lust for power. The Western businessman is content if, no matter how hard you struggle, he has his hands wrapped tightly around your money. The Japanese businessman is not content until he has his hands wrapped tightly around your neck. Then, when you are dead, he can take your money without a struggle. To a Westerner, business is a kind of serious sport. To a Japanese, business is a style of warfare. It is an act of treason for the Jewish industrialists to have sold plutonium to Japan. The year 1992 will go down in history as the beginning of the end of Western world domination, thanks to the Jews of the Clinton presidency. By giving the Japanese nuclear capability, the West has traded limited money for limitless power. But the Jews have been secret allies of the Japanese since the 1500s, when all Western powers were thrown out of Japan except for the Jewish trading colony of the Dutch East India Company. This is why Kyoto was never bombed during World War II, since the Jews of the Roosevelt Gang prevented it. The Jews and the Japanese have been in cahoots for 500 years. The Japanese know that no Asian country wants them to colonize, so they are colonizing North and South America by stratagem. Guam and Hawaii are known in Go strategy as extensions. Peru, Brazil, Canada and the US are known as invaded territory. Also, the Japanese chess game of shogi is very interesting. The pieces are pointed so if you capture one, you can turn it around to fight for your side. In this game, part of the idea is to turn the mind of the opponent so that he is fighting for your side. The Japanese apply this technique every time they hire an American to work for them. Every American lawyer and retired diplomat thus becomes a hired pawn helping the Japanese destroy the pawn's own country. Read Pat Choate's Agents of Influence, Alfred A. Knopf, New York, 1990, for a whole list of U.S. congressmen, lawyers, and lobbyists who, by every moral and ethical law in the world, are nothing but spies and traitors to their people in their country. By working for the Japanese, these dogs are mere shogi pawns. And yet, since they write the civil laws, they pronounce themselves to be honest and clean and very slick. Even President Ronald Reagan received $2 million as a payoff for helping the Japanese destroy the American electronics industry. Of course, he was only a dupe and a shogi pawn. But he is a good example of how unabashedly ruthless are the Japanese and what money-lusting fools are the Americans. But Americans would not be so quick to sell out their country except for the pressure exerted on them by their debts to the Jewish bankers. In shogi, as in life, it is important to be aware of your reserve forces and to apply the sneak attack or the ninja attack by dropping a captured player into your opponent's camp. Western chess simply has no reserve forces and the sneak attack is impossible. The Japanese, by their own admission, are a very sneaky people, in general, and it is appropriate that they have developed such a game. This is not racial prejudice on my part, it is merely an observation that anyone can make who knows Japanese methods. All that is necessary to understand the Japanese, is to have a knowledge of Chinese literature and an understanding of treachery and deceit. After all, there is nothing that the Japanese pirates have that they didn't steal from other countries including the islands of Japan which were originally inhabited by the Caucasian hairy Ainu and the Koreans. It grieves me that the Western industrialists and bankers have sold plutonium to Japan. This, no doubt, has already been manufactured into nuclear weapons in Japan's secret underground military factories. Yes, Japan pleads to be completely allergic to nuclear weapons, but this is only a Go strategy known as crawling to win. An interesting combination of both Go and shogi strategy involves the buying of golf courses. The Go strategy is called capturing real estate, while the shogi strategy is to place hidden microphones and pinhole cameras in the locker room so that the Japanese can gather intelligence from Western business executives and politicians. The Japanese make some wonderfully tiny microphones and cameras. Chinese chess is interesting in that the field is divided by a water barrier or a river. Some of the pieces can't cross the river and they act as home guards while others press the attack by crossing into enemy territory. The king is enclosed in a walled fort or city. And the use of cannons makes this a more modern game than Western chess. Westerners can never understand the secrets that Asians have for gaining wealth and property without studying the Asian chess games of Go, Wei Qi, shogi and Chinese chess, Shang Qi. While the average Westerner studies something as trivial as the baseball scores, the men of Asia study methods of placing their shops and stores on specific lots on a city block, or on a state or national map, so as to surround their Western rivals and capture his customers. Some of this is chess strategy and some of it is feng shui, a method of understanding the relationship between empty space and solid objects. Books, computer programs and videotapes of these subjects are available from the sources listed in the reference section below. I cannot stress enough how very far behind Asia are Western peoples in the fields of strategy and education. Much of this is the fault of the leftists in the U.S. government but much is also the laziness and ignorance of the average boob-tube-watching American, mesmerized with Jewish fashions, junk foods, immorality, and money swindles. Chapter 3 Education. As Confucius said, to learn and at various times to repeat what one has learned, is this not after all a pleasure? It is the peculiar idiocy of the average American to hold in great awe and reverence actors and actresses, baseball players or other sports players, as examples for their youths to emulate while stupidly looking at those who value knowledge and learning to be eggheads, nerds or weirdos. The Jewish media is the origin and cause of this destructive attitude. It is the peculiar astuteness of the Oriental to hold in awe and reverence the attainments of the great teachers and philosophers while looking at the playing of sports and games as being of a rather frivolous and childish nature. Herein lies one of the main secrets of Oriental wealth. Mencius said, "He who works with his brains rules, while he who works with his brawn is ruled." This doesn't seem to me to be a very Chinese thing to say, Anybody can say it and understand it because it is only common sense. And is universally true. Because Oriental parents know that the success of their children is their own success. And because they know that knowledge brings power and wealth, they encourage their children to study hard and to make good grades in school. And to use their knowledge for getting a good paying job. What is so Chinese about this? There is an African saying that, when the son kills a lion, the father smiles. This, too, is only human nature and universally true. But in the West, with its runaway individualism where it's every man for himself, the parents know that they will be growing old and feeble someday and that their children will certainly not be of any help to them. Indeed, Western parents have this false vanity that causes them to say, "Go out into the world, my children, and make a place for yourself. Don't worry about me. I'll be all right. I don't want to be a burden to you in my old age." Such thinking is nothing but fuzzy-headedness, vanity and ignorance regarding the true ways of life. It is a dead-end street on the road of human evolution. It is a dead-end street because neither the parents nor the children can survive to carry on the race. Little by little over the years, people who think in such ways will die out. The old people die without passing along their knowledge and wisdom. The young people shrivel up and die out lacking this knowledge and wisdom as they are faced with the inevitable economic and military pressures of other peoples who do, indeed, know the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. For the average American child to progress in school, it is up to the adults to encourage him and her to study. There is nothing worse that a modern parent can do than to allow the child to listen to the radio and especially to watch television while doing their homework. And any child who eats sugar, white flour and chocolate will never have the mental powers nor the high educational level that children have who do not eat these mental and physical poisons. Sugar causes hyperactivity, hypo and hyperinsulinism, pimples, tooth decay and its polar opposites of lethargy, dull thinking, and inability to concentrate. The depraved Western psychologists actually give such children dangerous drugs like Ritalin in the false belief that it is the child and not his diet that is the source of all of this alleged hyperactivity. And these same psychologists and junk food producers attend the same synagogues as the Ritalin manufacturers. Surely, Jesus spoke the truth about these devils. By the time that an American child graduates from high school, he will have spent 15,000 hours in front of a TV set, compared with only 11,000 hours in the classroom. 18. Children who spend Saturday morning in front of the television are getting a weekly cram course in unhealthy eating, according to a study that counted 222 junk food ads during 4 hours of cartoon shows. Sugar-coated cereals, candy, cookies, chips, fruit-flavored drinks, chocolate syrup, fast food meals and pizza dominated the commercials. This kind of broadcasting is leading to eating habits that cause obesity, tooth decay, heart disease, diabetes and other diseases. 19. And so, for the sake of making money, American junk food manufacturers poison innocent children and destroy their own country. The Educational Testing Service, in a 6-country survey sure to bolster the harshest critics of American education, reported that 13-year-old American school children score worse in mathematics than their counterparts in all 5 of the other nations studied and fall close to the bottom in science as well. Students were tested in Ireland, South Korea, Spain, Britain, the US, and in Canada. The children who scored best in both mathematics and science watched the least amount of television. The survey, moreover, reported that the American 13-year-olds watched the most television while the Koreans watched the least. Taking a walk through any suburb, village or housing area in the world, allows you to see firsthand what the people do for entertainment. And the type of pastimes that are popular with the people gives a clue to the inner working of these various people's very minds. The children playing in the streets and between the houses, the women gossiping over the fences and the men participating in their own social activities, allow you to understand the richness and depth exhibited by humanity. However, in the United States, there is very little richness and depth. A walk through any township or neighborhood is a walk through a desert. There is no one around. Everyone is indoors watching the Jewish television shows. Wrapped in their cocoons of apartment walls and housing stucco, the people are mere bodies sitting in front of ghosts projected onto glass. The retarded mentality of a 10-year-old child that is reflected in the television mass media is also absorbed by the TV watchers into their daily lives. Fully 72% of Americans, 21, do not even know their neighbors, so hypnotized are they by the electric Jew. Precisely and truly stated, anyone who watches commercial television is a fool. There is not a single program that exists primarily to entertain or to inform the watcher. Their only reason for a program's existence is to keep you in the chair long enough to sell commercial products. All so-called news and entertainment is secondary to television's primary goal of selling commercial products. And while the boob tube shines and flickers, a person's very life is ebbing away. But they don't notice, so enwrapped is he or she in the images that seem more real than life. And while the couch potatoes dream away their lives like opium addicts, they leave the streets and neighborhoods abandoned to the thugs. Marshall McLuhan, the famous media guru, was quite wrong when he hypothesized that TV is an extension of the nervous system. Actually, TV is a substitution for the nervous system. And instead of a functioning brain, all that the watcher is allowed to possess is a consuming mouth and a ravenous desire. These are perfect industrial sales targets. These are perfect dupes for the anti-religious, materialistic, pornographic, creeping communism of the purveyors of the Jewish media monopoly. A child cannot envision years in advance because he has never been an adult. But since an adult has been a child, it is up to the adult to guide the child through the snares and pitfalls that life holds. To say to a child, "Study hard so you can get a good job when you grow up," is the Western way, which accomplishes little. There are a million things that the Western child wants to do rather than to look into the future for a good job for himself. Watching television or playing baseball are as far into the future as he can see. But to say to a child, "Study hard because all of your sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles and your dear, loving parents are depending upon you to do well in school so that all of us may prosper when you grow up and get a good job," now that's giving the child an immediate reason for doing his best. And it is a reason that is with him for his entire adolescence, since the reminders of his loving parents are so near at hand. Through using such methods, 34% of Asian adults in California are college graduates versus 25% of white adults, 7% of Hispanics and 15% of black adults. Getting a good education is one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. But it will not work for you unless you are able to enjoy a close and harmonious family that shares both the good times and the bad times with mutual endeavor. This secret works wonders for these children's grades in school because they know that it is the truth. They will, indeed, give money to their brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles and parents when they have good-paying jobs as a result of their excellent school preparation. And these relatives will help them and work with them in whatever businesses they enter. Under such a system, the Western people, while being great ball players, grow poorer and more stupid, while the Oriental people grow richer and more intelligent. But once again, this is not a matter of race, it is a matter of common sense. And anyone can have common sense, but why do so few Westerners apply it? Chapter 4: Frugality. I have already mentioned frugality as one of the secrets of Oriental wealth, but I would like to return to this subject here once again. The slow accumulation of wealth is a secret of both the Oriental as well as the Jew. Saving every penny is a very good thing to do because the pennies add up. And when an entire family saves every penny and pools their resources, they end up with a considerable fortune in a very short time. I have already mentioned the healthful, tasty and cheap Oriental foods as well as given my special recipe in Chapter 8. But there are a few things that I have not covered yet. When a Westerner furnishes their house, they pretend that they are lavishly wealthy by buying all kinds of overstuffed chairs and couches, coffee tables, beds, wall-to-wall carpets and cabinets for their house or apartment. Looks seem to mean a lot and they pay for things that are expensive and look nice. An Asian, on the other hand, prefers only that the furniture perform its function. A bed is a bed, a table need only be a stable table, a cabinet is designed to hold and store things, not to be admired. And so, whatever will do these jobs, even orange crates for bookshelves, is certainly good enough. When money is saved by buying second-hand furniture or using no furniture at all, since a thick carpet is usually good enough for both floor and bed, then the money can be better invested in things that will bring even more money in the future. An Asian prefers to follow the teaching of Lao Tzu and to hide his brightness and to hide his wealth. It is better to live frugally, appear to be poor, and to have money in the floorboards than to have expensive furniture, look rich, and to owe everything to the banker and credit card company. Chapter 5: Buying Wholesale. There is more than just the joy of Chinese cooking and the predilection of Asian people for opening a restaurant. A restaurant is merely a business to a Westerner, but to an Oriental, it is a livelihood for themselves and all of their relatives and friends. Just as an army moves on its belly, as the Westerners say, so too does any group of people. They can drink water without much help, but to eat is sometimes a real logistical problem. When people work for mutual benefit, a restaurant or grocery store is not just a way of pulling in customers so as to make money. A restaurant or grocery business is a way for buying wholesale food and selling with little or no markup to relatives. It is a way of feeding not only one's own extended family but as a way of feeding any and all relatives who need something to eat. The food can always be traded for a labor if the relatives have nothing in their pockets. Unlike any other business, a restaurant automatically solves all of the 7 essentials of life. And a restaurant provides intimate meeting places for family reunions, New Year celebrations, and business meetings of a private nature. You can read about this in The Game of Chairs in Chapter 7. When Oriental businessmen work together in mutual endeavors, they can pool their buying needs and get the best price breaks when buying wholesale from the distributors. Thus, while a Western business might get a 30% break in wholesale price for buying $10,000 worth of goods, an Oriental business gets a 40% price break because they might buy $50,000 worth of goods. This $50,000 does not come from the needs of a single business but from the pooling of purchases from several Oriental businesses at once. Say, 5 Oriental-owned liquor stores or 5 Oriental restaurants or 5 of any other kind of Asian-owned business each buy the $10,000 worth of goods that they and their Western competition also needs. But since they pool their buying needs, they get the same goods at a 10% cheaper price than does the single, Western buyer. This is a hidden secret of Oriental wealth. Taking a strategic move out of the game of Go, an Oriental businessman can place his various goods in the shops of his friends and relatives. Thus, while the Westerner is trying to sell his goods at his one, single location, the Oriental has his goods distributed all around the city on consignment. This is a kind of saturation marketing unknown to the West. So, what's wrong with a Chinese barber shop perhaps selling some packaged noodles or a few pieces of jade? If Westerners don't like it, then perhaps they should be on friendlier terms with their own family, friends and relatives and make more money, too. And by buying cheaper than the Western buyers with group purchases, the Oriental can either sell at the same price to make a 10% higher profit or sell at a lower price to drive the Western competitor out of business. Either way, the Asian business prospers while the Western business declines. So why can't the Westerners do the same thing? Because they only understand the idea of teamwork when they are playing silly children's games like baseball or football. Once they get onto the playing field of the business world, all that they learned from their sports is thrown aside and it's every man for himself. An example of how incredibly selfish and individualistically conceited the average Westerner is, can be seen every day on the streets and highways of the United States. This phenomenon is in the form of the average pedestrian crossing the road. These silly people will step right out in front of a long line of cars not caring that they are stopping perhaps 50 or more automobiles just so that they can cross the street. Even to wait a tiny moment for a break in the traffic or to run across the street instead of slowly ambling like cattle, is beyond their mental faculties. By law, pedestrians have the right of way and they blithely insist on taking it without the slightest courtesy. The deceleration, stopping and re-acceleration of all of these cars and trucks for the sake of each of these selfish pedestrians must use up millions of barrels of gasoline and diesel oil every year. Chapter 6 Loan Clubs. For those of you who would like to make more money without using the Oriental methods described above, perhaps the Asian Loan Club is for you. With this method, you can get any amount of money depending upon the number of people in the club and how much they all want to invest. Using this method, many thousands of Asian immigrants without a single penny in credit have been able to get the cash they need for business ventures. Here's how it works. First, these clubs or associations use no written records except for membership lists. So, you see, it is important that everyone involved understand the virtues of honesty and trust. The club's goal is to produce a large enough amount of money so that a single one of their members each month is able to acquire enough capital to start a business. At the same time, the interest that this person pays is divided up among the other members. Any number of people can be in the loan clubs, 10, 20, 50, 100, or even 1,000. But let's use as an example a club composed of 20 people. If each member makes a monthly contribution of $500, this gives the club $10,000 a month to loan out. And because there are 20 people in the club, this makes 20 months in which the club will operate. Each month the members bid to borrow the loan pool. Whoever offers the highest interest takes all the money as a loan, but they must pay back immediately from their loan the amount of the interest. Members of the club each have different ideas on how to make money with this seed capital, and they each have different time schedules for making use of this money, so they don't all need to have this money the first month. Some can wait while others need the money immediately. So, each month, whoever bids the highest interest for the club's money, wins that month's pot. But they must pay back the interest that they bid immediately. So, if someone bids $2,000 interest, then he or she would draw $8,000 from the $10,000 pot and the remaining $2,000 would be divided up among the other members. Of course, by not keeping any records, the interest income is tax-free. Each member is only allowed to draw one loan from the club. The last member to take the pot doesn't have to pay interest because since everyone else has already withdrawn a loan, there is no one left to bid against him. At the end of the 20 months, the loan club is dissolved. However, the organizer usually asks everyone to renew their membership in another club. If some people drop out, that's okay because new members can be brought in. Needless to say, this system will only work if the members know and trust one another enough to keep making the payments every month. There is another system that is sometimes used in which the club members draw marbles or hazelnuts with their name on it for the pot. Again, each is allowed but one win. This system is not usually for the anxious entrepreneur but more for the gambler. But in this way everyone becomes rich with the help of everyone else. Chapter 7 The Game of Chairs. Another type of loan club is called in Southeast Asia, the Game of Chairs. This type of loan club is popular with the very wealthy Chinese businessmen. The meetings are always held at an expensive restaurant complete with pretty girls and perhaps entertainment to go along with a sumptuous banquet. When all of the fun and food is over, the waiters and waitresses are asked to clear the tables and leave so that the game of chairs can become more of a business affair. Around the tables, only the club members are seated plus there is one, extra, empty chair. This chair represents the position of the chairman of the board of the new company that will be created out of this game. There is one thing about money, you can never have too much of it. All members of these private clubs are usually wealthy financiers, bankers, import-exporters, etc. and these men all have their various ideas of how to invest or start new businesses if they only had enough investment capital. And the problem with borrowing from banks, besides losing the interest, is that there is a paper trail following both you and the money that you borrow, whereas with a loan club, there are no records. And where there is a paper trail there are usually government tax collectors sniffing around. And so, these wealthy loan club members who all know and trust one another begin not by bidding for the loan but by telling each other the ideas that they have for making millions of dollars. These are gentlemen, in the true sense of the word, and none of them would dare to steal an idea that was presented by any one of them for his own selfish purposes or he would face ostracism from the members. The first person to speak is usually the one who hosted the game of chairs. He hosted the game because he had a brilliant money-making scheme that he wanted to share. When he has finished presenting his ideas, someone else may brainstorm that idea or present an idea of his own. Some, perhaps, don't have any good ideas and so they remain silent. But each person who knows of a way to invest a certain sum, tells his idea or the investment opportunity that he sees and states the amount of money that this idea would need to be actualized in the business world. After everyone has said what they wish to say, whoever has the best idea for making money wins the chair if there are enough members who are willing to invest in his scheme. Each investor becomes a percentage partner in the venture in respect to the amount of money that he invests. And the winner of the chair picks up the tab for the night's festivities. If the ideas presented have no one willing to invest, then the one who hosted the game picks up the tab for the evening. So you see, a game of chairs can be very expensive to the one who calls for a game but fails to have a reliable idea. Everyone has a good time no matter what, but these kinds of loan clubs involve hundreds of thousands of dollars each and are, consequently, only for the very rich. And yet, the system works for any number of people using any amount of money. The only limitation is how much these people can trust one another to continue making the payments each month. Asians can do this whereas, perhaps, Westerners cannot. Anyway, this is one of the hidden secrets of Oriental wealth. Whether you use all of the above secrets or only a few, you cannot help but to become richer. And now, try the cooking method in the last chapter and while you save money, your health will improve from this excellent food. Good health can make you rich because it is something that you have which is beyond price, that is, good health is priceless. Chapter 8 Tao Wei's Hawaiian Eskimo One-Pot Heavenly Pig Out Cooking Method. Here's a way to feed 4 people for $2.50 or less. I devised this method of cooking in order to save on fuel and to save on washing up the mess that wok cooking often makes. While wondering how to keep the heat in the pot, I remembered that the Hawaiians for their luau cooking would build a fire in a pit for several days until the rocks were hot. Then they would bury in the pit a pig with all the trimmings for a few more days until all was well cooked. Thus, the Hawaiian name. With this method, 1 pot is all that is necessary. I use a covered 1-gallon stainless steel pot with a lid. Into this pot I add enough brown rice which, when level, reaches to the first digit of my finger. Add enough dry beans so that there are 4 parts of rice for 1 part of beans. This way, The rice and beans combine to make perfect protein because of their complementary amino acid balance. All dry beans will rehydrate just fine except for the pinto and the small red beans. These should be soaked overnight first. Don't worry about getting gas with this 4-to-1 rice and bean ratio. If you are cooking for more people, add more rice and beans, but whatever the amount of rice and beans, add double the amount of water. So, I fill the pot up with water to the second digit of my finger. Then I start adding whatever vegetables that I want, making sure to put the hardest ones in first, like carrots, turnips, ginger root, beets, celery, potatoes, garlic, etc. Then the softer ones like onions, daikon radishes, cabbage or bok choy. It is best to fill the rest of the pot up to the top with cabbage or leafy vegetables or the beet tops and then put on the lid. The water should not be salted or seasoned at all. Put the pot on your hot plate or stove or hibachi or campfire at its highest heat. What you want to do is bring it all to a boil until the steam comes out from under the lid. Once this happens, everything in the pot is as hot as it is going to get. Make sure that the steam is hissing out real good, but don't take the lid off because you want everything to stay hot. Don't worry about the high heat. Nothing will burn. You'll see. Now, take the pot off of the fire and quickly wrap it in a towel or cloth of some kind and quickly put the whole thing into one of the ice chest type coolers. No ice. The ice chest should be dry and not contain any ice. After all, an ice chest is merely an insulated box. Whether it keeps heat out and cold in or keeps cold out and heat in is all the same to the ice chest. So, by putting this steaming pot into the insulated box, all of the heat is trapped just like the heat is trapped in the rocks at a Hawaiian luau. The ice chest I use is called an igloo cooler. Thus, the name Eskimo. Now all of these vegetables, I suppose you could add meat, too, but I've never cared to try it, will continue to cook just as if they were in an oven. The heat is trapped and can't go anywhere, so it stays in the box and keeps on cooking. The food will be ready to eat in a half hour if you are in a hurry. Or if you want to wait, this meal will be ready to eat at any time of the day and will be steaming hot even 8 or 10 hours later. In fact, it gets more delicious the longer you wait because all of the juices blend delightfully. Women should make note of this method for pleasing their husbands, since they can cook the whole thing up in 15 minutes in the morning while fixing breakfast. Pop it into the igloo and the husband can take it to work. When he opens the box for lunch, he will have a steaming hot and delicious meal. And there is room in the igloo for eating utensils, a small bowl and condiments, too. Regarding condiments, this sort of cooking does best with a splash of cold-pressed oil such as olive, soy, safflower or peanut and a dash of soy sauce. Leave out the oil if you are dieting. Don't buy any kikkoman or any other of the synthetically prepared junk food, MSG-filled soy sauces. Only use natural soy sauce for the best flavor. And at home, this method will save the ladies many hours a day over the stove. Using only brown rice and beans as the basis, there is an infinite number of flavors that can be cooked up depending on the combinations of vegetables that you use. And thus, the name, Tao Wei's Hawaiian Eskimo One-Pot Heavenly Pig Out Cooking Method. All you have to do is leave the pig out and go ahead and pig out. Bon appetit. The end. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed this get-rich audiobook. Share it with a friend and replay it as often as you like. See you next time.